allow the international community to understand that our fight in the West Philippine Sea is not just for us Filipinos. It's not just for our own sovereignty. It is a fight for everybody that wants to preserve the rules-based order. Otherwise, we're going to go back to the system before the First and Second World War that might justifies whatever actions that they can do. And that is what we're doing right now. The mere fact that we launched transparency efforts 2 years ago, marami ng bansa ang nakipag-ugnayan sa Philippines.
The rest will still stick around a little bit. Siguro yung mga ibang kaibigan natin sa media, if they have questions that has to do with the legal aspects of the West Philippines disputes or even the strategic aspects, are there any questions or any reactions? Or
Yeah, I think we have to be more strict in registering late birth registrations with the Register of Civil Registrar. If there is a late registration, it should not be the sole authority of the civil registrar to approve it. It should go to, let's say, DOJ or some other body, just to make sure that there is a counter-checking mechanism. Because you've seen a lot of late registrations that turned out to be fake, and that's the entry of a lot of
diretso tayo sa programa. Dito naman na panggabi ng Lunes.
So I think that has to be certain.
Ngayon, no?
It cannot be the civil registrar himself who will decide that this late registrant should be approved. It has to be another body just to counter-check.
Gabi po ng Monday. Okay, dito po sa
for that, no, ang ano natin dyan is when there is smoke, there is flame. So we do not downplay any report that is given to the Armed Forces of the Philippines. Ang AFP is just one of the players in this. No? So if you look at this, we have to approach it in a whole of government approach. No? So if you look at all of this malign influence, all of these parts and bits and pieces that form part of a grand plan, tulong-tulong ang lahat-lahat ng iba't ibang ahensya rito. So tinitingnan natin dito, katulad nitong huling national nga na iniimbestigahan natin, he got his citizenship because he married a Filipina. So nasa batas kasi din natin yun. So yun yung nagamit for legality of that. So what we look into on the side of the AFP are national security implications. So yun sa side namin. That's why we are fortifying our units to have this intelligence command and cyber command, kasi nga ito na yung modern warfare that we're facing. So we also have to marry, yung efforts ng ating AFP into the contemporary modern challenges that we face. So ito hindi kaya ng AFP, ito lang, but together with all other agencies, kasi nga Bureau of Immigration kasama dito, di ba? Pati nga po yung mga birth certificates and all, they're all part of this. So hindi siya isang part lang po ang AFP to this, no? So we have to have great alliances also with the different agencies on this. And for this, nakita natin na naging mapanuri na nga tayo ngayon as we keep saying that security is everyone's responsibility. Hindi lang din government ito, but bawat mamamayang Pilipino. So hindi namin maisantabi na malaking tulong po yung reports na binibigay ng ating mga kababayan for us to really closely look into this. And kung meron mang report na matanggap ang AFP, aaksyonan namin ito.
If there's a disproportionate focus based on our intelligence that certain demographics are being targeted, should we work with community leaders there? Because as we speak, their community leaders are saying, "Oh, don't target us and all." So maybe the logical solution is let's just work together so that it doesn't come off as if we're targeting the whole community. We're just trying to look at the rotten apples here and there.
World leader just
Yes, sir. No? So this is all part of
He
this. No? So,
excludes America
yung
Masuki,
transparency
no?
initiative, sa amin sa
Hindi
AFP
rin
po, we came up with our communications
Okay,
plan.
mahawakan
No?
po
Meron
ang
tayong
award
plan
leader, no?
mulat. So kasama
Okay,
yan, we
ganun
really
map
go
na po
down
ay
to the levels of
Merian ni Trump,
even our fishermen, kinakausap
meron
fishermen,
po yung
kinakausap
focus,
natin
no?
yan. Kaya nga, itong mga
pakinggan
part
natin
ng
itong
drones,
si-
ngayon, nire-report na nila. No? So,
Okay, President ng,
through all of this, yung
Canada,
huling
si
lumabas
Justin
was a
Trudeau,
previous
Masuki, no?
incident pa. Dahil
Yung
nakita
anong
nga
sinabi
niya
niya
na
rito tungkol
ito na
kay
malaking
President
usapin na to.
Trump.
Na yung dati,
Tungkol
hindi
natin
naman
ito
nila
ay
nire-report
gera po
because
ng,
these are small incidents lang. Ngayon,
ng
they also
business,
see
no?
a bigger picture to
Hindi gera
this. So,
ng
mas
patayan.
malawak na rin yung
Gera
understanding
po
ng
ng,
bawat Pilipino, no?
labanan
And
sa
yung
negosyo,
concern
Masuki,
nila
no?
to be part of this.
Okay,
So,
pagka
gusto
natin-
talaga din natin dyan is to ignite
Okay.
the patriotism
Unahin
of the
natin ito.
Filipino and the nationalism
Kasi
of every
mahalaga po sa
Filipino
kabuhayan
to be
ng,
part of
buong
this
daigdig, no?
this conversation.
Hindi lang load sa Amerika, hindi lang load sa Canada, pati rito natin.
Sorry, Philippine Coast Guard.
Pati rito sa atin.
Another question?
Apektado tayo, no? Sa kasalukuyan, sa cost of living, hindi ba kayo apektado? Ay, sobra po mga
Sasaki from the Kyoto News.
Magdala ka ng
Japanese.
1,000.
I wish to
Maliwala.
ask
Sa unang
Ayan
tanong
po,
ko po dun
bumabili ka
sa
ng mga gulay-gulay lang.
insidente
Sa
sa
mais
Palawan,
na
yes.
wala nang 1,000 mo.
We have been
Ganun po,
coordinating
din ang
very
cost of
closely
living, mga suki,
with our
no?
intelligence services, with the
Okay, hindi na
Philippine
tayo
National Police,
paligoy-ligoy,
the National
diretso tayo sa
Bureau of
balita ng
Investigation,
balita
and
ko ng
all
hangin.
law enforcement
Okay,
agencies
itong,
of government.
world
Kaya nga nung
leader,
sinabi ko kanina, because there
leaders,
will be announcements here
destroyed
in the
Trump,
next few days. no?
si Chris Q. America, mga kababayan.
But siguro what I can say right
Yung
now
kanyang,
is that there will be more
domestic
arrests.
policy,
And this
First
includes
America, mga
what
suki.
happened
Ayun,
there in
ayaw rin po
Palawan.
ng mga ibang leader,
Because
mga suki,
we have
no?
ramped up our
Okay.
counterintelligence
Kailangan na
efforts.
magkaroon ng openness.
And because of that, we're slowly
Okay,
unraveling the conspiracy, no? This
American president,
operation
no?
that being done
Ayan.
by foreign actors
So, ito po mga suki, unahin
conduct
natin.
espionage in the
Okay,
Philippines.
para malaman natin ang mga
Ayoko lang
issue.
pangunahan ang
ang mga
National Bureau
global
of Investigation
issue,
in the Department of
mga
Justice.
suki, no? Kaya sinabi
But
ko lagi kayo
yes,
magbasa
we
po
are
ng
aware.
libro.
In fact,
Okay.
we are part of the
Hindi
team
naman
that's
na
looking into
puro-
this, and that
Okay.
we expect
pwede
more
naman natin
arrests in the
ipag-mix
coming days
itong mga
because you know when
kitab
you
natin,
when you
yung
have
Quran,
this type of
sa
individual
mali-
arrested,
dami
this
pong
leads to
libro
another
pumasok,
individual
mga,
to another individual,
mixed
no?
book.
Because these are all
Okay.
cells, so to speak.
Mix research.
Okay. So the other
Okay,
question, the typhoon missile system, I
ginagawa
think
natin gabi-gabi,
the
okay,
Philippine
no?
government has made
Okay.
very clear its
Sige,
position
sige,
that
sige. Napakinggan natin.
the presence of the
Balance
typhoon
lang
missile
ba?
system in the Philippines
Conventional na
is
pag-study natin.
was part of course
At saka
of the
itong may
Balikatan
secret naman sa
exercises.
atin,
So the purpose of that
mga
was
kitab
to
natin, mga suki, mga libro.
train
Balance
Filipino
lang.
troops
Wala namang
in
masama,
utilizing
mga
this.
suki, no?
It is not
Okay,
for
doon naman
offensive
sa-
purposes. No? It
Okay,
is
ang
primarily
pinaka-importante,
for defensive purposes
yung
and to
niyat mo.
ensure that the Philippines has
Amal yung
capacity
ano ba
to
yun?
operate
Ano
such
sa-
weapon system.
ano,
And the
amal
Philippines
niya?
has expressed
Well,
its
yung
interest
mga
to buy
medyo
these
pa yung
types of
mga suki,
systems.
mga kababayan,
In the
no?
same manner that we bought the
Okay.
BrahMos missile
Yun na
system, in the same
malum-
manner that you know
ano?
we're getting other types
Yun
of
na mala-
weapon systems.
malum-
The
niya.
Typhoon is just one of
Okay,
those
anong ba yung karugtong wari? Manawa?
tools that we can
May
use
kwan pa yun.
to strengthen our comprehensive archipelagic defense concept.
Sige po,
And
mga
very
suki.
clearly,
Yung pinaka-
it is for
buod
defensive
po ng
purposes.
pinaka-
No?
sekreto po, ang
as mentioned
niyam,
by the armed forces,
Pag-niyat natin mga suki,
this is a
no?
sovereign act.
Kahit anong
This is a
gawain natin sa
decision
mundo,
of the Philippine government
yung niyat
that it
mo
was
yun
not
ang
meant
in-accept
for
ko
any
na-
other state. It is for
Okay, direkta.
the
To the oneness
territorial
of Allah
integrity of the
subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Philippines.
Yun ang in-accept niya.
And quite rich for China to talk about nuclear war as well. They're nuclear submarines and they're doing intercontinental ballistic missile tests last September. No? From the AFP perspective, and then I want to go also to Justice Scorpio on this big question.
Sa ating puso, mga suki,
For that,
sa ating kaisipan,
na-mention
no?
naman ni Sir, it's
Okay,
all
basahin
part
natin
of the
ito.
comprehensive
Ito mga
archipelagic
ito ay
defense
trabaho
concept.
lang. Mga ito,
What
part
we
po
do
ng trabaho. Yung
in terms
niyat
of
natin
fortifying
iba yun.
our defenses
Ayan.
is a sovereign act of the Philippines. And
Okay.
kasama lahat
Trabaho
yan
ito
is
kasi
are
hindi
all
pwede
interconnected to
trabaho.
one another.
Ano
Our
kahit
CAD
pakain mo
C
sa pamilya mo.
is connected to our
Ayan.
modernization projects.
Maraming klaseng
It's
trabaho
connected
lang.
to the laws that are being passed,
Sige po.
yung lumabas na about our archipelagic sea
kanya-kanyang,
lanes,
expert
our
isang tao. Kanya-kanyang skill.
SRDP. So
Meron
lahat
magaling
po ito
magbilang ng pera.
is all connected to
Meron
one
naman
another.
magaling
So
sa microphone.
whatever we do in
Okay,
terms
meron
of
naman
fortifying our
magaling na
defenses
skill
is
binigay ng
for
Allah
us
subhanahu
to
wa ta'ala.
determine
Kanya-kanya mga
and to
suki,
put into play
mga
without
kababayan,
any external entity dictating how we would do it.
Justice Scorpio, how do you see the whole Typhoon drama. Do you think the Philippines should push for acquisition of those weapon systems? Do you think we're making the Chinese rightfully nervous about this?
10% sa Canada.
What should be the big grand strategy on this front, if I may say?
Well, we're just following what China did to the U.S. The Chinese, to prevent the Americans from
25%
sailing the South China Sea, they developed their Daofeng
10% sa
DF-21,
energy.
22 missiles, and that could target the aircraft carriers 1,000 kilometers away. And that is the asymmetrical defense. Very expensive to have aircraft carriers, to develop aircraft carriers. So with this far cheaper missiles, you can deter the aircraft carriers from entering the South China Sea. We also cannot manufacture warships where they're very expensive. It's cheaper to have BrahMos missiles or Typhoon missiles to serve as deterrent. This is a matter of deterrence, really. We cannot hope to invade China with this. We cannot hope to defeat China with this. We can only hope to deter China with this. And that's really the reason for this. Simply deterrence, not to intimidate China, because China's nuclear bombs. You cannot intimidate somebody who has nuclear weapons and you don't have. You will be wiped out. So this is purely deterrence, and that is how China should see it. We're just defending.
But Justice, there was a question: should we eventually push the Americans to extend their nuclear umbrella to us, or maybe it's too early to go that far? Because that's a big debate in Japan, from what I understand from conversations.
Well, that goes already with the Mutual Defense Treaty, because if there is a nuclear attack on us, then the Americans will be obliged legally to support us, and the only way to, under international law, you have to retaliate with the same force that was used against you. So if it's a nuclear attack, you can respond by a nuclear attack. That's automatic under the Mutual Defense Treaty. It's because mutual defense means you can respond proportionately to the gravity of the attack.
Are there other questions?
The business community is equally alarmed.
We more proactively call out certain questionable behavior, perceptions, narratives, because I think we have to be honest that the Philippines is, for me, in a kind of a double Cold War, right? One is we're caught in between US and China, but the other one is that there are two major coming elections. I know our government people cannot say much about that, but I would start with you, Justice Carpio. How should we navigate this kind of a two-level Cold War of US-China competition and Duterte administration, or Duterte versus Marcos kind of competition as we head into these elections? Because my sense is could be the first election whereby TikTok will play a very important role. We saw that in the US with the swing voters going for MAGA. We saw that in Indonesia with Prabowo's elections last year. But also I think this is the election where we'll see a lot of discussion on West Philippines issue. We're already seeing surveys, no? Na boboto ba kayo sa mga pro-China candidates? We never had surveys like that before, right? Now we can have even, so that means that the tenure, the cadence, the trajectory of conversations is getting more serious because we're in a very serious situation. I think people are not realizing what's happening to us is not just normal espionage activities. This is like Berlin of the 21st century. I don't want to scare people, but I think we have to realize we are at the very front line of big tectonic movements in terms of geopolitics. Justice Carpio, maybe some final notes on that, and then also what are the things we should do moving forward, especially with elections coming in and things getting very hotted in the Philippines?
Well, there is only one country in the world that is invading us using use of force or threat of force, and that's China. It's invading our maritime zones. It's invading our island territories in the West Philippine Sea. And there is only one country that is able to support us, to help us deter China, and that's the U.S. So it's very clear where we should ask for help, who should be our ally in this epic struggle to defend the West Philippine Sea. So, and in the Philippine context, you have families here. One family is allied with China, another family is allied with the U.S., and that is how it's being played now. So at the moment, we are forced to ally ourselves with our former colonial master, because our colonial master has no more territorial or maritime designs on our territory. It's China that has territorial and maritime designs on our territory. So I think the choice is obvious. We have to defend our maritime zones and our island territories. That's the first obligation of a state, to defend its territory, because without territory you don't have a state. And that's the way I look at it. We really have no choice but at this point to have the US as our ally, because it's the only nuclear armed country that's willing to defend us against a nuclear armed China. Thank you.
So avoid false equivalence. Just quick point, Justice Scorpio. Obviously, you and I have not been shy of being critical of governments throughout different administration. Even when you were inside government, you were critical. I think in media, in academe, we're always trained to be, basta kung anong position ng government, dapat we have to check it, to balance it. I'm not saying that we shouldn't criticize the government, but do you think it is also important for people to realize that we need to have, I hate to use this word, unity more than ever, right? Considering the urgency of the situation we're facing. That's why I use the term whole of nation. Whole of nation doesn't mean that we'll just be okay with whatever happens with the government. But whole of nation is also this basic understanding na may mga bagay kung saan talaga dapat magsama-sama tayo. And may mga bagay na talaga you have to have private-public partnership, and civil society has to work in tandem. I mean, this conversation is very much multi-sectoral, right? Not only interagency. What do you have to say about that, Justice? Because you're the most experienced person here. You have straddled government, civil society, and academia throughout the years.
Well, as I said, I think the government now, the incumbent administration, is on the right path, right policy as far as the West Philippine Sea is concerned. I mean, we just have to tweak some of the strategies and the tactics, but it's on the right path. We have to assert the arbitral award, we have to defend our island territories, and we have to strengthen our alliances with the U.S. and like-minded states. And we must invite our allies to sail in the West Philippine Sea, because by sailing the West Philippine Sea, they're actually enforcing the arbitral award. And we are on the right track, but we have to tweak some of these things, because like, for example, arbitration, there's a reluctance to file an arbitration case now. We have to convince the government to do that. Thank you.
So proactive. Commodore Tariela, final word? You want to borrow the other one?
Minsan nagugulat ako kay Richard pag biglang ako na yung tatanungin, sir. Well, I think West Philippine Sea is the most unifying issue that we have right now. And the 2025 midterm election, para sa akin, this will be a litmus test on how unified the Filipinos are when we talk about the West Philippine Sea issue. Noong mga nakaraang election, we never ask accountability among the candidates, how they stand or how they view the issue in the West Philippine Sea. But because of the transparency effort of the National Task Force West Philippine Sea under the leadership of General Eduardo Año, we were able to awaken the sense of patriotism ng ating mga kababayang Pilipino. They were also asking like how ordinary Filipinos can support our fight in the West Philippine Sea. I think this coming election, this is the best way that you can support our fight in the West Philippine Sea. We have to make sure that those members of the legislative branch that we're going to elect, whether in the Senate or in the Congress, are those people who will be supporting President Bongbong Marcos in standing firm with his commitment of not surrendering a square inch of our territory to any foreign power. Huwag na tayong magboto ng mga kandidato na pro-China at hindi susuporta sa modernisasyon ng Armed Forces of the Philippines at ng Philippine Coast Guard. It will be very difficult for the AFP and for the Coast Guard, for BFAR and other government agencies to support our annual budget kung ang ilalagay natin sa Kongreso ay ang mga membro ng Kongreso at Senado na never really cared about our fight in the West Philippine Sea. So, the most important and patriotic contribution that you can do for our fight in the West Philippine Sea, our elect members of the legislative branch will be supporting our government in not surrendering a square inch of our
Nakabawi
territory.
ang
Thank you.
internet ng bagal.
Ano na, Mr.
Parking premise is our right is our right. So ang sabi nga ni Jay, no, ang uniting factor ng Filipinos ngayon is the usapin ng West Philippine Sea. And with that, no, as we shift from the AFP, from the internal security operations to territorial defense, ito na yung magiging focus natin. When we say territorial defense, it's not an outside entity coming in, but we're looking at the Trojan horse inside and trying to look at kung ano yung different factors that contribute to a greater grand plan, no? Kung ano lahat ito. And as the election season comes in, no, ito may malaking usapin dyan is our barn elections, which is a historical feat for the Philippines. And we're looking at any influence that will hamper the peaceful conduct of this. So, kasama lahat yan sa lahat ng tinututukan natin. And with this, bawat mamamayang Pilipino, parte tayo dyan as we exercise our constitutional right to have our voice be heard and have a stake on who will be leading us into our future. No? Ito lahat, we do not lose focus on the bigger challenge and the bigger picture out there. Kung ano man itong mga nangyayari internally, let's look at how it is connected to the influences that they have with the bigger challenges we have. And as one Filipino nation, no, kung ano man yan, pinupush natin na for the rest of this, mga kababayan natin na nalihis ng landas to come back to the folds of the law, and together we fight the bigger challenge, which is territorial defense. And so, ang laging binabanggit ng AFP po dyan is, ito po ang ating karagatan, ito ang ating karapatan, at ito ang ating kinabukasan. This is our seas, our rights, and our future. So, alam natin ito,
pasensya,
atin itong ipaglaban.
May
at
na
atin itong
internet
sumunod.
now. Antayin
Isa
natin
pala.
ang wakas.
Ko, actually, Dariela for Senator.
Okay, master na yung...
Matagal ko na itong sinasabi. And medyo disappointed ako nung gumaan yung filing ng kandidacy. Hindi nag-file ang aking senador. So, pagpasensya na natin, hanggang postcard na lang siya. For now. Well, una-una, just very short lang naman to. I just want to thank the Filipino people for the overwhelming support. 84% of the public in the latest Octa survey show that 84% of the Filipino people support the Philippine government's position in asserting our rights in the West Philippine Sea. And as you mentioned in the bakit hindi 100%, it's because we're not a authoritarian state. We are democracy. And 84% sa ibang bansa, napakalaki na niyan. Sila, meron na silang 55%,
Lahat pag
56,
internet ang
tuwan-tuwa na sila. That's already a
Problema
vast
lahat.
majority. But us to have 84% in one of the largest countries in the world, no, with a large population, to have that kind of critical mass supporting government is a really big thing, and that is because of people like you, Richard, no, and my colleagues here in government who continue to fight the good fight for God and country. Maraming salamat.
Thank you very much.
bahagi ng ating mga kababayan po natin sa Lolo Luzon, Central Luzon, sa University of Manila, at po natin ang Manila. Pero sa Visayas at Sicaw, po tayo nagbahagi sa Visayas Italy, palipan tayo ng pansin. Wala po tayo na namamonitor ay na
Itong issue ng espionage, malign influence, unauthorized ISR, whatever you want to call it. Maybe I'll ask first Colonel Padilla about this. What are the facts of the case in terms of yung itong mga espiya daw na nahuli ng gobyerno at sinasabi ng mga ibang eksperto at saka yung sinasabi ng ibang like Senator Riza, for instance, na may kinalaman din ito sa POGO. So these are issues that we have been discussing na are POGO's nests for espionage. Senator Lacson was raising that back in 2019, etc. What are the facts of the case, and should we look forward towards certain big developments also in the coming days to the degree that you can share? Thank you, Colonel.
Yes, Richard. This is an ongoing investigation, no? So hindi ko pwedeng i-deal itong facts of the case in detail, so to speak. But generally, kung ano naman talaga yung what the public has already seen, no? This was a joint na operations between the Armed Forces of the Philippines and the NBI. And nakita natin dito nga na may kahina-hinalang mga activities itong Chinese national. And nung nahuli nga siya dito sa Makati with a RAV4 vehicle, meron siyang mga improvised na technological equipment sa loob ng sasakyan. And with that, of course, we have to conduct forensics dun sa laman ng buong improvised na tech, no? And we look at this as one whole system. So when we say system, there's components of hardware to it, yung software na ginamit doon, no, yung the data that passes inside, no, and what is processed, yun yung pinaka-importante. Kung ano yung laman nun, ano yung purpose nun, and saan patungo yun for what it's worth, no, kung saan siya gagamitin. So lahat yan iniimbestigahan. Hinihimay-himay siya in detail, all of these components, and as we look at that, we also try to see how it is part of a bigger issue at hand. So we're trying to take a step back, look at the bigger picture and connect the dots together. So it's like a puzzle piece that we're trying to fit in all of the different scenarios at hand. So titingnan natin to how it connects to our geopolitical tensions that we're facing, no? Pati itong mga drones that were recovered in our seas, lahat yan, no? Over and above that, marami pang iba't ibang mga pangyayari that would fit into the picture.
So you're saying this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's a whole network of operations we're potentially looking at here.
Could be, yes. Pati nga yung illegal POGO activities.
National Security Council, Yusek Malaya. Okay.
Well, kasi there were statements made by the Embassy of China, no, that supposedly the accusations are baseless, no, that and that we should stop hyping the issue. You know, on the part of the National Security Council, I think what we would like to say is that we have a solid case. No? We have the solid case against the Chinese agent or spy that we arrested. No? Of course, we cannot preempt the release of the information to the public. The evidences that we have collected over time. Kasi I'd like to emphasize to Richard, no, na hindi naman ito parang one-day operation. No? There was extensive case build-up and surveillance was done on this individual. No? So nakita natin yung galaw niya, nakita natin na pinuntahan niya yung mga lugar na kahina-hinala and places of significant military importance to us, significant strategic locations which pinuntahan niya, nag-surveillance siya doon. And let me emphasize also that they were caught red-handed, no? Which in legal parlance is in flagrante delicto. No? So hawak-hawak niya yung mga surveillance equipment, no? Kaya nahalala yung mga galaw niya. And then, so, ang masasabi lang namin in reaction, of course, to what the Chinese embassy and the Chinese government said in Beijing, is that this individual will have his day in court. Kaya nga natin pinal yung kaso. Diba? We filed the necessary cases for violation of the Espionage Act and the cybercrime law. And he will have his opportunity. But so far as the government is concerned, we have a very solid case. And we have all the necessary evidences to prove his culpability.
Yusek Malaya, and of course, newly minted Dr. Malaya. Going back to this, a few months ago, there were a couple of reports about a certain person posing as a journalist who was apparently working with the MSS, Ministry of Security Services of China. So it looks like, you know, the AFP and our security agencies have been looking into this espionage networks for quite some time. Was that the tip of the iceberg? Are we also looking at, again, of course, Happy Chinese New Year, of course, you know, we don't want to go into this paranoid, xenophobic kind of mode, but the reality is that we also have cases whereby people posing as journalists, legitimate journalists, but actually they're engaged in high-grade intelligence gathering operations. How is the government approaching this issue and making sure at the same time we don't get into an overcorrection mode?
We have suspect that for a long time that they had extensive operations here in the Philippines. I don't want to preempt the announcement of the NBI and of course other relevant law enforcement agencies, but there will be more arrests. No? There will be more arrests we'll probably have announcements in the next few days about other individuals which we also caught conducting intelligence operations in the Philippines. So, ang ano lang namin sa ating mga kababayan, we'd like to thank all of them for their support to the government. Kasi nagsisimula ito sa report ng ating mga kababayan. No? So, again, our appeal to the public, if you see any suspicious activity, please report that immediately to the nearest law enforcement agency, the Philippine National Police, even the armed forces. They have their intelligence service which can help us, and of course the National Bureau of Investigation. Yes, Richard, that is just the tip of the iceberg, and there will be more arrests in the coming days.
Okay, sunod na balita natin
we
ang
have seen the
impeachment
extensive
rocks.
operations that they have been doing in the
Kaso
Philippines,
ba,
and
yung
slowly
complaint
we are
versus with
able
Sara
to
to
disrupt
be
and
transmitted.
to stop all of these
Okay, to
activities
speak
in our country.
this week.
Can I ask both of you, and then I
Okay,
want to go
ayon po
to Justice
ng,
Cargill and also
Secretary
Commander
General ng,
Tarelli on the bigger issue of dealing with treasonous activities,
Congress,
espionage
no?
activities in peacetime, because there's a
Okay,
legal
sa
aspect to
lower
that.
house. Si Secretary
But
Velasquez.
before that, where is the
Okay,
POGO
pakinggan
angle
natin
here?
ang, kung anong
Because the
kahinatnan
concern
nito.
was that
Paano
you had a
magkaka-
massive
impeach,
influx of nationals from certain
busy na
countries. It
lahat
looks
ng
like the
mga-
verification mechanisms were not optimal. There were already concerns about PLA or
Okay,
Chinese
tumatakbong,
intelligence agents
mga
embedding themselves in some of
representante.
these supposedly
Wala,
legitimate
mga
business
suki, no?
activities or online casino
Okay,
activities.
sige,
Anong kinalaman
bigyan
ng dalawa na yan? The reason I'm asking that is because, I don't know, maybe this is just
Medyo
correlation,
mainit
not
na
necessarily
issue.
causation. But sabi ng marami,
Okay, sa kasulukuyan
kumunti
nitong,
daw yung mga spam sa text nung
impeachment.
paalis na yung mga pogo.
Okay,
Right? So at
po
least
kay
maybe,
Vicky Sara
there's one
Duterte,
thing we
no?
notice, baka may kinalaman mga yan.
Subukan natin,
But
pakinggan
the
natin.
more serious concern could be perhaps,
Kung ano ang,
where's the pogo angle on this?
the latest.
If you look at it, there's a
Sa
different side of the
impeachment
POGO
rocks ito.
dito, no? Yung illegal side nila.
case, no?
Ang nakita natin dyan, with all of the investigations that have been made,
Sige.
may mga human trafficking tayo that was involved. Meron tayong mga cyber incidents, no? Na mga spamming incidents, scamming. And ito was evidence, no? By dun sa mga raid that were conducted, and nakakita din tayo ng mga equipment na nandoon. What I'd like to point out here is para sa ating mga kababayan na wag i-downplay ito. Kasi some are saying na hindi naman high-tech itong equipment na to, and ano. But what matters is the data that is being taken and how it's gonna be used. Pag titignan mo yung data that's inside, no, the NBI will give a list. These are hundreds of topographic images of critical infrastructures. So our power grids, our camps, our PNP and AFP camps. So bakit itong mga to ang talagang nandoon, no? Mga pantalan natin, mga frequented by Filipinos, malls, 'di ba? So, mall-goers sa mga Pilipino eh. So, syempre, for us in the Armed Forces of the Philippines, we look at national security in general, and all of this that has an implication to national security, such as critical infrastructures, talagang titignan natin yan. So, we really do not downplay all of these things, and we really value nga po itong mga reports that are coming from our kababayans. Kasi, pati po yung mga na-recover nating drones from the seas came from our fishermen. Sila yung nag-report nito. No? So, ngayon, may mga nakikita tayo like in social media. In the news kagabi, sir, meron din nag-report about yung kahina-hinala nga na Chinese national taking videos of PCG assets, no, and Navy assets. So, itong mga to, we're looking at all of these things and trying to see how all of these incidents fit into a grand plan.
And if speaking of grand plan, I mean, one of the defense you always hear from folks in the civil society, especially from the Chinoy community, is this idea that, oh, you know, we were talking a person who asawa niya Pilipino, 10 years na siya dito. So, are we saying that it's possible that the MSS or China is targeting also Philippine-based or even Filipino citizens for that matter? Because some people are trying to use that to say, hindi yan magsaspy kasi Pinoy naman yan just because may Chinese blood or something. Is there a particular demographic that is being targeted? Is it a diverse demographic? Just for people to have an idea.
Yes, sir, no? Ang una natin dito we'd like to point out is we do not want to promote xenophobia and racism. So we're not targeting a particular race or ethnicity or kung ano man. But ang tinitingnan natin dito is evidence-based. So we always work on empirical data on kung ano yung nagagather natin, no? Na kahina-hinala nga. So it doesn't necessarily hone in, but ang nagkakataon talaga is nag-huli siya to particular nationality. So, but again, it's always evidence-based. And yun nga, ang sabi ni Sir, they will have their day in court, and dun naman, they will have the opportunity to really, put out their case out there.
I'll go back to the critical infrastructure, but I also want to get the view of other panels. Justice Scorpio, going back to this, what is your read that our perhaps legal software has not been updated enough to deal with the liquid warfare, this kind of new emerging security challenges we're facing in the Philippines? Do we need to update our laws to deal with peacetime, treason, espionage activities, etc.?
Yes, I think we need to update our criminal laws. For example, under existing law, under the revised penal code, treason can be committed only during wartime. So, a Filipino who does this help the Chinese gather information vital for our national security cannot be prosecuted for treason. So we have to change our laws because iba na ngayon, no? We are now in the cyber age, and the Chinese don't have to send their people here. They can just send robots, drones to gather information, or use Filipinos here. So we have to update really a lot of our criminal laws, especially on national security.
Thank you for that, Justice. I'll get back to that theme again more. Comrade Tariela, you have been at the forefront of dealing with trolls. It's like, I think we can change notes on the analytics, right? But this is information warfare, right? And it's a serious warfare because it's a battle of narratives for the hearts and minds of people. Is there an evolution or change you see in the narrative strategy? How serious is this information warfare? Do you expect it to get even worse in the coming months and so? But before that, can you also give us an update doon sa nangyari on the ground right now, itong monster ship ng China na monitor niyo? So a little bit of update on the ground and then going back to this more information warfare and espionage theme.
Thank you, Richard. The China Coast Guard monster ship that we monitored last January 4 at a distance of 54 nautical miles away from Capones Island, Zambales. Ginawa ng Philippine Coast Guard dito sa pag-utos ng ating Commandant, Admiral Ron Hilgaban, is to deploy Teresa Magbanwa. That is the biggest Coast Guard vessel that we have. And then from January 4 until now, we have rotated our vessels from Magbanwa to Gabriela Silang, Suluan, Cabra, and then again, it's BRP Teresa Magbanwa who is again taking the responsibility of monitoring and challenging the China Coast Guard monster ship. For the past days, we have been very successful in pushing back the China Coast Guard vessels. Right now, as we speak, the latest position of the Chinese Coast Guard 3304 that replaced also the Chinese monster ship is at 88 nautical miles away from Zambales. So, as far as the Coast Guard is concerned, we are committed in protecting the interests of the Filipino fishermen, in safeguarding our maritime jurisdiction, and at the same time, laging sinasabi ng ating Pangulong Bongbong Marcos, we should come up with actions that will not escalate the tension. Regarding your questions sa mga trolls and disinformation, Richard, no? I think when we started the transparency efforts, we noticed that there is a sudden surge of trolls, no? Mas dumami ang active trolls nila ngayon in different social media platforms. Mas naging loud ang trolls ngayon pagdating sa pagpapakalat ng maling impormasyon sa West Philippine Sea. I think this is the reaction with the transparency efforts that the National Task Force West Philippine Sea is doing right now. And at the same time, we are coming up with different approaches to dominate the public discourse about our own factual narrative.
Thank you for that, Commodore. Obviously, nowadays a lot of conversation about China's technological breakthrough, DeepSeek among others, and one of the things that caught people's attention is how DeepSeek seems to be very wise and intelligent on all sorts of questions, except when you ask them about Tiananmen or West Philippine Sea or sensitive because agents said, "Oh, I'm just an AI assistant." I don't know anything like that. Which brings it back to the issue of cybersecurity. Colonel Padilla, you are the expert in cybersecurity issue. What are the things that we have been doing, again, without spilling the beans for our friends, in terms of protecting our basic critical infrastructure from cyber attacks and cyber sabotage. How important is our cooperation with our allies, trilateral, US and Japan, but also other new allies that are coming on board. And I want to also connect that to other critical infrastructure. For instance, the big news the other day was the Maharlika Fund is trying to buy into the NGCP to make sure there's more direct government stake. But then again, you talk to technical people, they'll say it's not the financial part which is the issue, it's the engineers who run the show. It may be 40% China, but 100% China when it comes to the technical engineering part, right? How important it is for us to de-risk, to clean up, right, some of the vulnerabilities we have built on throughout different administrations. Because to be fair about it, it's not one or two administration in our critical infrastructure, cybersecurity and also other forms of critical infrastructure.
Yes, Mr. No. In our command conference nitong January, our commander-in-chief or president has given the AFP guidance on strengthening cybersecurity, not just within the AFP, but in coordination with different agencies as well. So kung titingnan natin dito, we're looking at this not just in the security aspect, but cyber operations in general. So how do we use all of these gadgets? Paano magiging mapanuri yung ating mga kababayan and all this, no? So, ang kasama natin dyan, task natin is to teach them about cyber hygiene. Kasi security is everyone's responsibility. So kung ang great online presence natin, gamitin natin to our advantage, makakatulong ang bawat kababayan natin. So we can use social media to give reports, to make all of this video showing itong mga kahina-hinala, then they can be part of evidences and all those things. No? So, ang cyber operations is not just it's a system nga, no? How we use this hardware, ano yung policy natin to use certain softwares. So kung tingnan nyo yung US, they already banned TikTok, diba? Which is a Chinese-owned...
Until Trump saved them for 90 days, but let's see where this...
Yes, so may mga ganun. So, ang tinitingnan natin dyan, how the Philippines will also look at all of this as an angle of us trying also to have certain policies that will govern our presence in the cyber domain. Kasi nga, ang laki ng presence ng Pilipino sa cyber domain, no? So, lahat yan tinitingnan natin. And of course, the advent of artificial intelligence. With AI now, you don't even need to have a troll farm with all of these people in front of computers. You can just use an AI and yun na siya, no? Lalabas na yung ano. And the possibilities in artificial intelligence is endless. We can use it for different needs. So, ang tinitingnan natin dito, if AI is being used to attack us, to be antagonists on our part, then we also have to look into AI for our defense.
You have something to say on TikTok? I have a lot to say on TikTok, but maybe I'll talk to their legal team first. Man. You know, I mean, especially elections also coming in, right? I mean, one of the reasons raised in the US for banning TikTok, although there's a Trump element there, is that it's not only what's happening now, but what could happen in an event of conflict, right? So one of the scenarios, let's say there's a war over Taiwan, and then, you know, vast majority of Americans are, you know, into TikTok, then there could be a manipulation of information to undermine a kind of a, you know, rallying around the flag, or a kind of at least basic understanding of the facts of the case when you have a whole of nation approach supposedly when you're dealing with conflict. What is the level of discussion right now in the Philippine National Security Council when it comes to these issues? Because the DeepSeek now is, everyone is downloading it, so much so that now I think it's only restricted to people of Chinese numbers or something like that. It's a dami nagda-download because it's just so easy to use. It's so efficient. And then of course TikTok, which is doing very, very well. How worried should we be about these things without being, again, paranoid and overcorrective and also unfair to these folks? I mean, shout out to TikTok Philippines. You know, they helped me to restore my account, which weirdly went, you know, banned and then returned, right? Like, weird things happen.
Yes. Siguro, Richard, before I answer that, balikan ko lang yung sa amendments to the Espionage Act. Yeah, kasi this as part of our discussion on espionage. Kasi what we have is Commonwealth Act 616, which is a very old law. 1941 pa po itong batas na ito, no? And as you mentioned very clearly, yung ating mga batas on espionage are pretty much outdated and it needs to be updated. And there are several bills now pending in Congress. Unfortunately, given the lack of time, material time that we have, probably this won't pass this Congress, but this will be again part of the priorities of the National Security Council once Congress resumes its session sa June, no? So if this Congress, our focus was on the passage of the Maritime Zones Law and Archipelagic Sea Lanes, next year, ang ipupush namin is the amendments to the Espionage Act and the Foreign Malign Influence Act, no? Two very important pieces of legislation. As you mentioned, as part of lawfare in our desire to insulate or inoculate the Philippines from this, no? So, just some important things that we need to update in our laws is to emphasize that espionage may be committed in times of peace and war, no? That should be very made clear in our laws, no? And itong the violation, no, can be imposed on a foreign nation or enemy of the state, whether this be domestic or foreign. That's to be very made clear also. These are the things na gusto nating ma-amend, no? The use of drones, for example, kasi dun sa lumang batas, photographic evidence lang, no? So dun sa lumang batas, if you take photos of a military installation, that is espionage. But if you use a drone or if you use a similar machine or device, hindi siya explicitly provided in the law. So we would like to include that as well. And then yung fines, no, has to be increased. Dati 10,000 lang. Right? So we want this increased to 1,500,000. Even the penalties we have to increase. So lahat ng ito, no, these amendments are clearly very needed given the fact that we are slowly uncovering a massive a lot of intelligence operations being done by foreign states or foreign powers in the Philippines, and by doing so we will be able to complete our defense system against them, because we really need good legal foundations to be able to proceed forward.
Thank you for that. Justice Scarpio, I mean, obviously, we're not the first country that noticed we need to update our laws. A lot of our democratic friends, you know, I used to be based in Taiwan and Australia a lot. They have been having this conversation for a long time, and they have been updating and upgrading their legal infrastructure for quite some time. And these are liberal democracies, vibrant democracies. What are the best practices, perhaps, that could serve? Of course, it has to be a Filipino-specific, legal update. But nevertheless, we do have best practices that we can draw on, right? To make sure. Kasi, for sure, sasabihin naman ng yung mga nag-aspire. Kasi kung 10,000 lang, okay na yan. Kung kikitain ko 1 million, 10,000 lang. So, you know, they're gonna say, oh, this is authoritarianism. And, you know. So, how do we make sure it doesn't get weaponized, in short? And do we have evidence that it's not getting weaponized in other fellow democracies?
Well, the US and the Europeans are a good example because they have updated their laws on espionage, but they have maintained, they have protected freedom of expression. No? So Australia has also recently updated their laws, and it's about time that we also update our laws. But the protection will always be there. It's in the Constitution, so that cannot be changed. But we just have to have a change of mindset. Remember, during the time of President Duterte, he even allowed Tito, which is obviously supplied by Chinatel, all the equipment comes from China, to put up these towers within all military camps nationwide, and that was allowed. Fortunately, the military did not implement that, so that has been scrapped, as the way I understand it. But we have to be very conscious of these developments now, because even our phones are being tapped all the time. I mean, it's very easy to follow. You don't know it, but you're already, all your emails are already being tapped. So we have to be very conscious. For me, I just assume that I'm being tapped by China. I mean, and so you just have to be careful. But we have to update our laws also. Thank you.
That's why ganun yung mga sagot niyo sa akin in the middle of the night, just in case may gising pa sa kabila. Comment tayo lang, I mean, kailangan ba ng kasuhan din ng live volume? Kasi, I mean, maybe Justice can also put something in this minsan. I mean, of course, as a public official, the threshold is different, but minsan medyo iba na no? Kaya parang ayoko mag-government. Parang ngayon pa lang ganyan na what if government ka na, di ba?
Alam mo, Richard, the other day yata, no, the Congress already mentioned the possibility of looking into etong mga trolls na nagpapakalat ng misinformation. They also mentioned the West Philippine Sea encountering our transparency efforts. So I think the Congress and Senate, I think last year, Senator Jinggoy also filed a statement na the Senate should look into those trolls that counter our narrative in the West Philippine Sea. As far as the legislative branch is concerned, I think it's not just us who noticed this, that they need to look into the limiting the freedom of expression. No? Alam naman natin how the disinformation and fake news affect our position in the West Philippine Sea. And sometimes may mga Pilipinong na bubola itong mga China trolls na to. And that makes our position very hard to push to the Filipino people for them to understand our position in the West Philippine Sea.
And obviously, it's not just trolls, right? There's some people who have suddenly think tanks popping out of nowhere. They're suddenly experts on South China Sea. I never heard of zero Google Scholar citation, but apparently they're experts on UNCLOS. I mean, they're going toe-to-toe with Justice Carpio and Jake Patubakal. Should we nudge our friends to be a bit more transparent about where their loyalties lie? Like,
alam mo, hindi lang to mga claiming to be an academic. Itong mga ibang pro-China trolls na to, hindi na nga trolls, these are real people. Ay dating gobyerno, no? Taga-gobyerno before. They used to be public officials. May maayos ang reputasyon noon, hindi na lang ngayon dahil pro-China na sila.
Kung may blank item, ikaw blind item sa Congress. Okay. Justice Garvey, you want to say something on that? Because, legally, wala naman problema, diba? You can just enroll as a, you're an agent of foreign influence. I mean, there should be mechanisms like that, right? Para wala tayong problema. Kasi wala naman problema in terms of academic discussion. But when your argument is always pro-China and then you happen to be based here and
sa national, sa local, baliktarin muna natin.
press statement ng ibang embassy, that raises some questions, right? So we're not against academic debates. I argue against Philippine cases in some of the writings I have, but iba yun sa parang nangyari sa iba. Should we nudge our friends? Should we have a mechanism for registration as foreign influence agent?
Well, in the US, the Foreign Agent Registration Act, you have to register if you are acting as an agent of foreign government, if you're receiving any kind of compensation from foreign government. I think we have actually a law, but it's not being implemented. Yeah, we have to really update that also and require all Filipinos who receive compensation from foreign governments to say particular things for that foreign government should register as a foreign agent. That can be required. That would be constitutional.
When you say compensation, let's say you're taken to some five-star hotel somewhere nice in, let's say Shanghai or something. Does that pass as compensation, or should be like a certain amount of money, wire transfer, etc.?
Well, it should be a certain amount, but it can also be benefits.
Benefits, yeah, like fellowship, like visiting scholar.
Yeah, in the U.S. Constitution, they call that emoluments, but it's broadly interpreted. That would be an emolument also if you receive a first-class ticket, your first-class hotel accommodation. So we should update our law on this because I think the existing law that was passed during the martial law regime on registration of foreign agents, I don't think anyone registered ever. So we just have to update it.
Right, yeah. No, I mean, the reason I say, like, for instance, in Australia, with the case of Sam Dastyari, the senator, right? Parang there was a small gift, like a few $100, something like that, but that became a basis, essentially, for huge investigation into espionage
Sa
activities in
ibang mga
Australia and
media.
all. I think in New York, as we speak, the current mayor is under question for getting all that free business class trip from Turkish Airlines. So it doesn't have to be, and now $4 million. It doesn't have to be millions of dollars, right? It could be like free business class trips. That could pass as some form of compensation, right? I'm just trying to clarify to people that na hindi kailangan milyones ang bayad sa'yo para maging ano ka, diba?
Hindi malaki.
Yeah, we have really to tighten because we see now that China is exerting so much influence now in the Philippines. No. So we just have to tighten all of these rules.
Colonel Padilla and Isaac Malay, something also on this issue in terms of tightening up itong Foreign Agent Act and also making sure that we have also transparency initiative on that front.
Yeah, so we'd like to re-echo nga itong sinabi ni Secretary Ann. So we have in the Armed Forces of the Philippines, we also have to have a foundation and a basis for our actions. We're looking at this as a united front works ng China. And so we're looking at all of these activities. Pagtitignan kasi natin to, there's different powers of the state. And there's two domains na pantay-pantay tayo, walang mahirap at mayamang bansa, walang which is the information and the cyber domain. So, kaya nating sumabay dito eh. So, yung information as we speak, Maritime Transparency Initiative na talaga namang sinusulong ng ating grupo, no? But ito yung target ng kanilang United Front Works na basagin itong yung pagiging solid nitong ating Transparency Initiative. So, we're looking at all of this and also yung cyber implication nito, no? Ang batas kasi ng Pilipinas is only on cybercrime. So, very negative yung niya. But the cyber operations as a whole, what equipment will be using, what software can we be using, how to use them, where to deploy them, diba? Yung mga bring your own devices in certain networks, wala tayong batas tungkol dyan. So, itong mga to, kailangan din natin itong palawigin sa ating bansa. Para pati yung mga certain agencies, ano lang yung pwede nilang gamitin, ano lang yung mga devices na pwedeng kumonekta sa certain networks, user-raised assignments, kasama lahat yan. Napakalawak ng pwede pang mangyari, not just cybercrime. Kasi yun nga, ang batas natin, only the criminal aspect to it, the use of
And are you having interaction? Because I'm sure last year everyone was busy with Quadcom and Huaping and all. But what is the level of interaction with the legislative branch to make sure they're keeping abreast and doing their job on this front?
Sa side ko ng AFP, we are one part of the big picture. No? So this is more of like a national task force, or whole of nation, whole of government approach. And we are one part of the players in this, and we're doing our fair share to coordinate with the different agencies accordingly. So, ito naman po yung aming tandem, especially with the umbrella of NSC, no? Kasi sa kanila nga yung policy level, so operational level, kami na po yung mag-i-implement.
Well, as mentioned by Justice Scorpio, we have this very old law which was passed during World War II yata, no? During just before World War II, as a reaction also to the passage in the US of their own Foreign Agent Registration Act. And medyo nakalimutan na natin ito, no? It could have been implemented before, but not anymore. But in the US, it's a very strong law. Very strict. The FBI would just go to your office and ask you if you're if you're a lobbyist or a firm lobbying for a foreign entity and hindi ka rehistrado, that could lead to severe penalties and imprisonment. No? So we also need that. So it's really a tandem of laws, the amendments to the espionage, an updated foreign agent registration, and the foreign malign influence and interference law, which a version has been just submitted to the Senate by Senator Tolentino yesterday. Okay, so again, we hope that all of these pieces of legislation will be prioritized by the Senate and Congress once the new Congress assumes office in June.
The other aspect I want to talk about is also we saw this emergence of LGU to LGU cooperation. So there, when it comes to Belt and Road Initiative, big ticket infrastructure projects, halos parang walang nangyari. I call it pledge trap, right? Maraming pangako, walang masyadong nangyari. But from what I understand is maraming mga LGUs, we don't have to blind items tayo ulit, na marami silang mga sister city projects with China, and this could have implications for
Itong,
critical infrastructure.
mundo
It's
ito,
not just
competition
building
ito, mga
schools or
kababayan. Kahit
road
anong
widening. It could be
linya mo,
something more, and some of these
media ka man,
LGUs are
sa
in very
vlogger,
sensitive locations,
no,
whether in the
online,
bigger
katulad
geopolitical
namin
sense or
online,
close to
online,
military
online,
facilities. How are we looking at that aspect, the LGU level? Because puro tayong national
secure
Yeah, we
kami
saw
ng
that already, what is called
permit.
as foreign interference on the
Okay,
subnational
para
level.
ma-legit.
Yeah, so
pumasok yun.
early last year,
Ayan.
eight,
Hindi po
the DILG
ibig
issued
sabihin,
a
illegal
order
yan.
on the moratorium
Okay,
of
hindi po
sisterhood
illegal.
cities. Kasi ang ginawa natin,
Kami
nag-inventary
ito,
tayo,
mag-secure ng permit,
iba't ibang mga
mag-secure po ng
sisterhood
maresibo.
or twinning arrangements
Ayan,
with between Philippine cities or local government units and those
Mag-resibo po
in
ng
China,
maresibo.
in the People's Republic of China.
Magpa-print po
And
ng
there was a
resibo,
review
parang
process
legal po
that was
masok yun,
undertaken. No?
Okay.
So there's a moratorium
Hindi
right
po-
now, and if there is a
Okay,
new
hindi po
sister
ay-
cityhood or sister city arrangement, it
Hindi
will have
po
to be
ay
submitted to the DILG. The
legal
DILG
trabaho
issued a
namin.
memorandum circular
Hindi
to
po
this
illegal.
effect. And a review panel or committee was created. Kasama po kami doon sa National Security Council. So, we're currently doing the reviews right now. And those that we feel are inimical to the national interest, we tell the local government unit to rescind or to repeal those provisions. Pero alam nyo kasi, it's also tricky itong mga sisterhood arrangements na ito. But because on the surface, sa tingin mo, benign, no? Pag wala namang mali, no? But it's really the networks, the connections, and the activities that come after the signing of the sisterhood agreements that is really suspect here. Kaya ang importante lang dito
Okay,
is to
mag-plug
create
in tayo
awareness
sa
on the part of LGUs.
national
Na dati kasi
candidate.
parang standard yan.
Ayan po
Parang
mga suki, mga
the more
kababayan,
sister
no?
city arrangements you have with
Ay,
foreign
itong,
LGUs, mas maganda. But now they understand that these are could be
Kandidato
instruments
natin sa national.
of foreign malign influence.
Okay,
And
itong,
if they do so, sila
for
na bahala.
senator.
They can now guard themselves
Okay,
rather
sa
than always the national
listahan
government
natin,
telling
wag
them.
din
So it's
natin
more
na,
of making them more resilient and
kaligtaan.
make them more aware
Okay,
of
wag
the
natin
pitfalls of
kalimutan
entering
po
into
ang,
sisterhood.
hunas
and-
ng
Are you seeing a lot of this sisterhood arrangements in, again, you don't have to name names, but in particular sensitive provinces, maybe facing West Philippine Sea, Taiwan? You know?
Yes,
Okay,
we saw
retired
that.
na
No?
area
So we
crew.
saw the
Nandang
sister,
pagkagawa, no?
that the LGUs had
Talagang
sisterhood
kulang,
arrangements
color,
were in strategic
kulay ng
places,
marino mga
either
sabi, no?
facing the West Philippine
Kulay
Sea
talaga ng
or
marino.
adjacent to a
Ayan.
EDCA site or in an area
So,
where
yan
mining
po, sa
operations
listahan natin, no?
are
Okay,
present,
hiniling natin,
and these
taga- yung mga
the
taga-supporter,
minerals in these mining operations
taga-
are
mga network
important
natin.
critical minerals for
Okay, kung
many
saan-saan
nations.
dito sa
Yeah.
Pilipinas.
Yep, hindi ko naman sinasabi.
Talaga.
I almost named
Number one
it. Yes,
po,
Justice.
lista natin po si,
Richard, I also like to bring up the
retired Colonel Ariel Kirubin, no?
Chinese Confucius Institutes that
Eh,
many of our schools have
100%
entered
sana
into
makapasok.
arrangements with Chinese
Okay, sa
universities
Senado itong si Ariel
for
Kirubin,
Chinese
no?
universities to establish,
Okay,
let's say,
malapit
in
na kampanya,
Ateneo and
Ariel,
UP
dapat
and
marami
other
ng,
schools,
mag-volunteer,
China institutes.
magbigay ng,
And it's a one-way
okay,
ticket
ng,
because China established...
Walang reciprocity.
Yeah, there is no reciprocity. We have
no?
allowed
Ayan.
China
Ang kaya
Institute
ko
in UP, in
mai-volunteer,
Ateneo,
itong
but
pag-plugging sa iyo.
Ateneo and UP
Kasi,
do not have Rizal
talagang,
institutes in their counterpart
puno na
universities in
talagang,
China. So we should
sobrang
demand
busy na po
reciprocity
ang,
because right now
yung
they
mga
can
kaibigan na
distribute
yan.
any kind
Ito
of
lang ang,
material, information
pwede
they
kong
want
tulong yan sa
in UP or Ateneo or in other
araw-araw,
schools,
gabi-gabi.
but we don't
Kasi
have,
yung kandidatura,
we cannot
no?
explain our
Okay.
position on the West
Wala, hindi
Philippine
na
Sea
kung
to the
kanyos
Chinese
po.
people.
Maglakad
So
pa
it's a
ako
one-way
na-
street. So we should demand
Saan-saan
at least
papunta, no?
reciprocity.
Kaya nga, ito lang ang may bigay ko sa
I want to
inyo,
go
no?
back to the issue of actually Rores and all of
Talaga,
the,
yung mga
also with
ibang gusto
Colonel Padilla and National Security
mag-volunteer.
Council. So you
Okay,
gave us an update,
pamagitan ng
Commodore
volunteerism.
Terriela, on the monster ship
Okay,
situation and
tulungan
all.
natin
What is the Rores situation in terms of resupply of our our facilities and our people dyan sa West Philippine Sea?
Richard, when we discuss RORE, that's actually an AFP operation. But as far as the Coast Guard is concerned, we have been supportive of the supply mission going to Ayungin. The last RORE mission was very successful. The Philippine Coast Guard vessel was also there to support the resupply operation. As to the details of which, I think the Armed Forces of the Philippines is in a better position to discuss the entire operation.
Thank you. I mean, obviously next time we'll try to have also DFA and others. But from an AFP standpoint, Colonel, because
candidate.
the last major incident and
Okay,
was around June
ito
last
ay
year, right?
nasanay
And
to
when
si
there was an injury to one of our servicemen at least.
Rodante Marcoleta,
But since then, there has been no major
Okay,
incident.
Rodante
So there are a lot of theories.
Marcoleta.
One theory is my
Okay,
understanding,
pangalawa,
my
salisahan
arrangement,
natin,
whatever.
no?
Again, what are the facts of the case to the
Okay.
degree that you can share? And
Eh,
what do you attribute the fact
Yun
that
din.
there's no
Yung
longer
mga
a major
voluntaryo
incident?
niya,
Is it because
lalo na
China's
po ay
accepted
kasama
that
niya
we're
sa
not going to accept
kanilang,
bullying, that we're going to stand our ground?
simbahan,
Does this
okay,
have to do
kung
also with
minsan
America and our
ay
allies
dapat
also standing with us?
todo
To the degree that you can share with us,
kayo,
ano
todo
yung
po
dahilan
mga
na
suki,
hindi
ha?
nangyari yung mga
Ayan.
kababalagan na nangyari last year? Kumbaga.
todo kayo.
So tingin ko third policy level yun, no?
Trabaho
Yung,
po sa politika, mga suki,
higher
no?
level than the AFP.
Okay,
On the side of the Armed Forces of the
very crucial
Philippines,
na
itong ating mga
papasok na po
ROA
ang,
missions, rotation and resupply,
itong,
is the
kampanya.
mandate of the AFP.
Ayan po.
So as long as we have
Okay, sino pang
AFP
pwede
personnel
natin
in all of
i-
these features that we hold, no? We will continue to perform our
Ayan
mandate
po, mga
to
suki, no?
look at the welfare, no?
Ako itong si
ng ating mga
Richard
deployed
na
dun sa area.
Bigbonasan,
So this is
ganun din.
a regular
Yung
theme
mga
for the Armed Forces of the
taga-guardian,
Philippines kasi mandato nga
yung
namin
mga
to
loyal
provide for
supporter niya, talagang dapat
good
kumain.
facilities for them, to feed
Sabi
them,
nga
and
kaya ako ay kaya
look
ko
out for
lang
their
dito po sa
well-being and
studio.
welfare all together.
Okay,
no?
kasi pag
So,
maglakad, hindi
hindi
ko
lang
na
kasi
gaano
ito
kaya po maglakad,
iisang
no?
feature lang. All of the 9
Okay.
features at any one time,
Ilan pa na nga po
regularly
mga
natin
drive?
kinoconduct that.
Okay,
In fact,
maglakad
all
po
the
sa
other 8 features, we
labas.
use gray ships for
Okay,
that.
hirap na hirap
No?
ako
So,
masukin, no?
continuous yan natin na ginagawa.
So, yan
kung
po
anong
ang,
usapin na nakapaloob
kasama
dyan,
po sa
that would be
national
on a higher
politician
level
po ay,
authority to
okay,
discuss. But
tinutulungan po
in
natin
terms of the
sa,
AFP, we will not be deterred to
sa,
continue providing for this royal
midterm
missions
election,
to
no?
our troops in the ground.
Okay, maraming mga debate,
Sa tingin ba
na
natin,
marinig natin.
nahanap ba natin yung right
Okay,
formula
dapat si
to
General
make sure that
Rodriguez,
China gets the message
okay,
na hindi tayo
papasok po sa mga
magpa-intimidate?
debate, no?
Or do you think
Isa
that
rin
this is an
makakuha yung
evolving
mga
threat and accordingly we have to keep
discussion
on
ba?
upping our game
Makakuha po
and
ng
working
boto.
more with our allies and all? I know medyo speculative
Ma-interview
question yan,
sa
but my
mga
point is that
news.
syempre evolving yung situation on the ground.
Okay,
China is not the China of 2 years ago, and I'm sure they're also responding accordingly. May pangtapat din sila sa Transparency
Katulog po,
Initiative,
Mas.
right? Or
Kahit ako,
they
gusto
try
ko
to,
magano,
right? So
no?
I'm sure they're
Okay,
constantly
gusto ko
adjusting to us, no?
interview po
Meron bang new
minsan
versions of salami slicing? Are we
online.
worried about setting dangerous
boses.
precedents if we have certain arrangements here and there?
Boses.
I think
Ayan.
ang napopoint out at
Sa-
napapakita
sa-
natin
sa
dyan
mga boses.
as a whole, no, with our
Ayan po, mga
great,
sige, no?
ano, no,
Yung audio
magandang
interview
samahan
pa.
with other agencies.
Ayan.
So, we are in very close coordination with the Coast Guard
So,
on
ayan,
all
sino
of these
pa?
foreign missions as well. And
Okay,
we actually
si
salute the
Palaban
Coast Guard
ng
for
grabe ang,
yung kanilang pag-deter, no, sa paglapit
Okay,
nga
Bato
nitong
de
mga
Rosa, no?
vessels ng
Pinagtulong-tulungan po.
China dito sa
Okay,
ating
sa mga
features.
sa
But
kanyang,
ang
mga
maganda natin
photo
i-point
bombs.
out dito is the
Okay,
great
pa-
resolve of the Filipinos to continue
po
on with
matitinag,
this
no?
independently.
Okay, karami
So,
po
tingnan
ang
natin dyan,
mga,
even if we have offers to conduct
katunggali niya,
foreign missions altogether,
kanyang
no,
photo bombs,
we do
mga
it
suki, no?
independently. Kaya natin
Ayan.
with our own resolves, with our own
Hindi
assets.
magpatalo.
As we continue to modernize
yung taga-
and as we also continue to strengthen alliances with
taga
like-minded
Santa
nations,
Cruz,
tinitignan din natin kung
Davao del
ano yung
Sur,
maitutulong nila.
ay
And not just
talagang hindi magpatalo,
for
no?
this, not just for these missions on
Marami siyang
sea, but
katunggali.
nag-ano rin to
discussion po,
nagre-resonate din siya
mga
pati sa ating
discussion po
HADR
natin,
missions.
no?
So, itong alliances natin,
Hindi
mas
talaga.
malawak yung sakop din niya
Okay,
over
kumunindigan,
that
hindi talaga.
just doing this
Ay
already.
patalo itong si Senator Bato.
Thank you for segueing into the
Ikaw
next
muna
important
po
part
ng
because we want to talk
rating.
about how the new Trump administration, what are the
Okay,
implications
ito
for,
nga,
for
ganun
our
din,
bilateral
sa
lines.
malasakit
But Yusik Mala, you want to add also on the
kung
RORA
mahilig po
issue from the National Security
tulong
Council
sa
point of view in
kapwa.
terms of coordination,
Okay,
making sure everyone is working
naman
together,
Kaya nga,
lessons
hindi siya
learned,
makalimutan
learning
ng tao,
lessons,
no?
moving forward.
Okay.
Well,
mga
Richard, alam mo
ganun
naman
po
that
lang,
we
mga
have
maraming kang
preliminary
nagawa ng
understanding.
kabutihan sa kapwa.
And the
Eh,
preliminary understanding really is
ang
the direct
taong
result
bayan,
of the June
bibitaw, no?
17,
Kaya sa top,
2024 incident wherein
Kala ko
meron tayong
nagawa niya
violent
si-
incident na nangyari
Okay.
na naputulan ng
Share
daliri
with
yung isa
you,
sa
no?
ating mga tropa.
Ayan.
So as a result of that, the
Pero,
People's Republic of
ganun
China
pa rin.
saw that they're not going
Yan
to
pa
get
rin sa
any
maglalaro
good
kong
press
Masuki, mga kababayan.
whensoever
Itong si Bongo,
dito sa
no?
mangyayaring ito, and
Okay, Christopher
they thought
Lawrence
of
Bongo.
coming to
Sa
terms with the
mga
Philippines. No?
mistisyo,
They
Pinoy
saw
ba?
the reputational
Pinoy.
damage that they suffered
Kasi
worldwide because the entire
nanay
world
niya,
knew how barbaric
Pinoy.
the actions of the Chinese
Pinay.
Coast Guard was. So
Okay,
that led to the
taga-Batangas, no?
BCM meetings that
Kaya
produced
ganon.
the preliminary understanding.
Tapos tatay
So
niya,
that was a breakthrough,
Chinoy.
and I must
Chinese.
emphasize that what's good about the preliminary
Kaya Bongo.
understanding is that we can now resupply our troops in BRP Sierra Madre in a peaceful fashion. And we have been doing so in a regular way since the signing of the preliminary understanding. And in the last DCM, both sides committed to continue the implementation of the preliminary understanding. So on the side of the Philippines, this really is a good step. Because, and also on the side of China, because that means that they are also open to some sort of arrangement. Because at the end of the day, what's critical is BRP Sierra Madre is still there. No? There's no way that it's going anywhere, and that we are committed to resupply our troops because they are a symbol of our sovereignty in that area.
Yes. Commodore and also Justice, yeah. Please.
Yes, I would like to just highlight that the provisional understanding that we have with China is only targeted in Ayungin resupply. It doesn't apply to the entire West Philippine Sea. There's no provisional understanding whatsoever that covers the entire West Philippine Sea. It's only concentrated in Ayungin.
But aren't you fearing that China will push for that? That yung precedence issue that, then maybe next we have to do on Sabina Shoal, next, yeah.
I don't think that we need to agree on something if we believe that West Philippine Sea belongs to the Filipino people, right? I mean, we can have that provisional understanding in Ayungin because of what had happened in June 17. But we should not come up with the idea that another understanding will also be applied in different pockets of the West Philippine Sea. Because as far as the Philippine government is concerned, we have sovereignty and sovereign rights in this area. So I don't think that it is a win for the Philippine government if we're going to come up with another agreement because we just want to de-escalate the tension. In the first place, the escalation, the provocative actions that are happening in the West Philippine Sea is only done by the Chinese side. As far as the government is concerned, we have been very peaceful. We are not provocative. We are always on the receiving end of their provocation.
Are there, I'll go to Justice very shortly. I want to just ask Commodore Teriela, what are the lessons you have learned from the Transparency Initiative? Magsi-second year anniversary na ba? Parang magsi-second year na, di ba?
Yes, the first news that we released in 2023 was actually the military-grade laser. That's the first news that we started the Transparency Initiative. Yeah, so second year this coming February 12.
So we're just a week away or so.
But again, the question ng mga tao is, how is the transparency affecting the Filipino people? There are some critics saying that the transparency is not really that effective to counter China. Again, babalik tayo, bakit ba tayo may transparency initiative? As I said, it's not a silver bullet to tell China to adhere to the international law. Our main objective for the transparency efforts is to create awareness among the Filipino people. And based on the last survey conducted, more than 84% of Filipinos says that they are supportive of the Philippine government's efforts in the West Philippine Sea. 91% of the Filipinos are also aware now of what's happening in the West Philippine Sea. This can also be further translated with making sure that the Filipino voters will no longer vote for pro-China candidates, right? So as far as the objective of the Transparency Initiative, since we launched it 2 years ago, we have been very successful in doing that.
Setting the baseline, no, of what is acceptable, what is our national position, what is international law, what is our... yun lang, my concern is there's still a 3 or 4%. like for me, why is it not 100%? Because in China, I'm sure it's 100%, right?
Well, again, going back to the issue of misinformation, the trolls, they're still doing this through their united front.
Justice, parang every week tayo nagpo-podcast on this issue. Pero have you noticed over the past 4 or 5 months, wala tayong masyadong bad news on West Philippine Sea relatively, right? And I think to be honest, I think a lot of us, maybe this is my case, we're a little bit worried that things could get out of control, right? Patapos ng Biden administration, distracted, war in Gaza, Ukraine, oh my God. But it looks like hindi nangyari yung worst case scenarios. Having said that, Justice Carpio, is there a danger of complacency, or actually we have to give credit to ourselves that perhaps we did something right to get China's grudging respect, and we can build on that into the coming months. And then obviously I want to also get your point of view on what should be the next step. Should we also move on an arbitration front? What are the other drastic potentially drastic move that has to be done.
So, we don't know kung ano nga
On the Rore, on Ayungin Shoal, we have to understand that Ayungin Shoal is part of our EEZ, Exclusive Economic Zone. It's low tide elevation, so it's part of an EEZ. In the EEZ, there's freedom of navigation for all countries. So the U.S. can go to Ayungin Shoal anytime they want without seeking permission from China or from any other country, not even from the Philippines. South Korea can do that, Japan can do that, Australia can do that. So with more reason, the Philippines should be able to go to Ayungin Shoal at any time without asking permission from China or from any other country. So I'm worried that this particular preliminary agreement will be taken by China to mean that they have some sort of control over our Rore. They do not have. We do not need their consent. We do not need to inform them whenever we go to Ayungin Shoal because it's our EEZ, and in the EEZ, all the nations of the world have freedom of navigation. They can go there anytime. That's why I agree with Commodore Tariala that we cannot expand this. This is unique and this should be temporary and we should end it as soon as we can because China will tell late. I can see what China will do now. Let us expand this preliminary agreement to the entire West Philippine Sea because we have agreed to it. No, we cannot because otherwise we will be giving up our sovereign rights. Let me be very clear. We have a right to go to Ayungin Shoal at any time, to bring any supply to Sierra Madre at any time without informing China, without meeting China beforehand, because that is our right, our sovereign right. The moment we try to limit that because China demands some limitation, we are already giving up our sovereign right. And China will use this example to expand this agreement in the West Philippine Sea. We have to, I'm anticipating China to do that already.
Well, to be fair to Secretary Manalo during my interview with him last year, he made it clear that we're not asking anyone's permission or anything like that. So it looks like some people weaponize the word arrangement or understanding as if it's like, oy pare, pupunta kami dyan, ha? Pwede, wag niyo kaming tirahin. Ha? Parang ganon yung ginawa ng China na narrative.
Yeah, we say that we have a right to go there, but in practice, on the ground level, every time we go there, we first have to talk to China, and that is a matter of practice. So that will take, China will say, oh, you have to do that every time you supply Pag-asa, every time you supply Lawak, you have to meet with us, and then we have given up our sovereign rights already. We have to be very careful because China has been doing this to Vietnam. The moment you give them a little leeway, they will demand more. So we have to be very careful that we do not give up our sovereign rights because whatever we do on the ground is the one that will prevail, even if you put there that without prejudice to Philippine sovereign rights. But if you actually do it in practice, you ask permission from them, then that will prevail.
Yes, please, yeah.
Clarify ko lang, no? You know, of course, there's a lot of speculation about the contents of the preliminary understanding because we cannot really release the contents of the preliminary understanding without the consent of China, no? The PRC. But let me just clarify that, number one, we do not ask permission every time we do the Rore. Number two, there is no inspection of any of the ships that go to the Rore. And number three, there is no so-called supervision. And I think the Armed Forces of the Philippines and the Philippine Coast Guard can bear me on this, no? Because we will never, as mentioned by Justice Carpio, we will never surrender our sovereign rights and our sovereignty because our position in Ayungin Shoal is very clear and that the BRP Sierra Madre is there as the flag bearer and as a symbol of our sovereignty in that part of the PRC, out of the West Philippine Sea. I think what yeah, exactly. I think what is muddling the issue here, is the spin being done by the PRC, no, in the statements that they're making. But let me just make it very clear to the public, as mentioned kanina, that there is no permission, there is no inspection, and there is no supervision whatsoever.
Just to be clear about this, and maybe Colonel Padilla also can comment this. is it because there was a gentleman's agreement in the past, whatever that was, that China's thinking they can have this mini gentleman's agreement? Is this they're trying? Because I'm trying to understand it. You're talking about precedents, right? The precedents I can think about is the gentleman's agreement under the Duterte administration with China. My sense is that if you're China and you had a gentleman's agreement with Duterte, your sense is you can always have something along those lines, a baby version of the gentleman's
Kasi
agreement.
what brought the preliminary understanding was the fact that the PRC realized that we will never back down. The PRC realized that we will continue to resupply our troops in BRP Sharamate no matter what happens. No? So they tried water cannon, they tried military grade laser, they tried every playbook
Okay, ang sunod
in
na
the
i-plugging
coercive manual
natin,
that they
itong
have.
si
And it did
Superstar
not work
may
because we
patches,
continued
no?
to do what we needed to do.
Okay, itong
Tuloy lang tayo ng tuloy. And then they found out na
Superstar,
it's useless doing all of these
dating PBA.
coercive actions to them
Okay, si
because the
Kenneth,
Philippines are not being
Remdes, no?
deterred. The Philippines is not being intimidated. So
Kenneth
they were the ones that told us,
Remdes
mag-usap
ng
na lang
South
tayo.
Cotabato.
So that brought the
Ayan.
preliminary understanding.
Maybe you don't have to answer. I'll just ask Justice Carpio.
Alam
Hindi
ko
ba
ba niya?
hindi kaya kailangan din natin ng bigyan ng konsuelo mga kaibigan natin?
Kenneth,
Para lang may masabi sila. Para lang may masabi.
Remdes.
Hindi.
Sikat na sikat
Shouldn't
po,
there be an accommodation of the need for face saving or consuelo as a matter of diplomacy, not operational reality? Because I think both NSC and Coast Guard and AFP have made it clear operationally, China has no say in what we do. But in terms of diplomacy, hindi kaya justice we have to give them some room to save their face kasi napaya sila.
Plugging natin po
Well,
isang superstar.
we can give them some leeway, but only once. Because if you allow it again and again, as you said, it becomes a precedence. And that is what we don't want to happen. Because right now, if you look at it,
Ayan, so
every
marami na
time
tayo
we resupply
na, at saka
Sierra
magsipasukan
Madre,
na po ang,
we have to meet with the Chinese. Now, is
mga
that
buhay-buhay
mandatory?
natin,
The
no?
Chinese are saying that is mandatory.
Basta
We say,
election
no,
kasi,
it's not mandatory, but we comply with
marami
it.
po
By practice, we are
gusto mo po
actually
maging
following
pangalan, no?
what China
Kasi
wants.
itong ginagawa
We
ko,
have to sit
very
down with them
effective
before we
mga
resupply
Very effective.
Sierra Madre.
Kung pag
That's why I
lang,
said we can do it once, but
kandidato,
next time let's go there and
call lang
resupply
po.
without
Kasi
meeting
itong-
with them, just to break that
itong,
precedent so that it will not
napasukan
become
po ng
a
South
precedence.
Group province na
And Justice, do you think that the next step, obviously I think we have slightly
Ayan.
different interpretation of this, which is why we are having this discussion.
Durante.
We're not supposed to have
Kaya
100%
dito, wala akong
consensus.
pinipili mga sabi, no?
But Justice, do you think
Ay,
that
sino pa siya?
we,
Basta
at this
mag-utos
point,
niya.
considering the fact na medyo
Okay,
tahimik ang
na
West Philippines, maybe it's the typhoon season, I don't know, whatever,
Okay,
na
yun.
is it
Yung
time for us to
natin,
think
no?
about the next step, including
Kasi hindi ako
potential
naman
another
ng
arbitration case? I haven't heard from DOJ recently,
po
but
yun sa
there was a news
trabaho.
item na naman the other week na baka there's a
Sino siya?
second arbitration on the environmental
Sa trabaho
front.
lang sa atin,
Is it
no?
serious? Should it be serious? Should we go to the next level? Because
Durante.
kayo po yung progenitor ng idea na yan eh.
Yeah, you know, there's one thing that China
Unlimited.
fears. China dreads that we will bring China to another arbitral case. But we should, because that's exactly what they fear. And we have an opening because one, we filed our extended continental shelf claim off the coast of Palawan beyond the Spratlys, and China protested. China said, no, we own that because that's within the 10-line. Under the rules of the UN Commission on the limits of the continental shelf, everything is frozen the moment there's an opposition. So we cannot move forward. There can be no
Kasi dito
decision
sa
because
Cavao,
the rules
itong masipag
say
kay at saka wise ka
the UN
maka-
Commission will not
kuwan
act
ka ng
because there is
mga-
an opposition.
Kaya nga, ano
Under
ito
the
eh.
rules, it's up for us now if we
Okay,
want to
yung
move it forward
connection
to
to
file the
our
arbitration
importante
case.
yung,
So we have to file the
influence ba?
arbitration case because that's the
Yung
next
influence
logical
mo
step to resolve the
sa mga
issue.
tao.
If we don't, then
Ayun
that
pong
will
hanap
be
buhay,
an
no?
outstanding issue
Okay.
forever. And we
Para
don't
yung
want that
mga,
because over time, China is gaining
public
ground.
relation
China is
expert
getting
naman.
more,
Yun ang trabaho nila eh.
is getting
Pero sa
stronger.
kanila
It has
malaki ang bayad,
more
no?
warships now. It has
Ayaw ko lang kasi
throughout
sa mga
military
trabaho
history,
ganyan, medyo,
it has the biggest
may kadelikado, no?
it has the most number of shipyards to
Kasi magkampi ka talaga sa mga-
manufacture like an assembly line
kandidato.
warships.
Plugging lang,
So
pagpaalala lang.
time is on their side. So we have really to
Lahat
bring
naman
the
ng
issue now
plugging
to the
kung
arbitral
paano na-
tribunal. But we're not.
Gusto niya ipa-plug.
That's why I'm saying we have to bring it because
Sige.
if we delay, China is winning.
Obviously, the thrust of the, and this is the last part of this podcast part, then we'll go to the press conference because Justice also has to leave soon. The whole point of the arbitration case is about a rules-based international order, and well, this is my opinion. And the new president of the United States is not necessarily, a paragon of rules-based international order. Greenland, Panama, I don't know what the heck is going to happen there, but there's some people, or at least this is the narrative some people are building, that with this new American administration, yes, you may have sympathetic figures like Marco Rubio, who has written on the need to help the Philippines. He's, of course, the new Secretary of State, someone very invested in our bilateral alliance. You have people like Elbridge Colby, who will be leading the policy in the Pentagon, who visited the Philippines the other year, and he made many reassuring statements. Hagseth, Mike Waltz, all of them said that it's important to have an Asia-focused strategy. That's all good. But the reality is that on one hand, you have Trump being Trump, talking about grand bargain, deal making, saying all of these things about China, which it's not very reassuring, just to be honest about it, including his, volte-face on the TikTok ban, which some people, even in his own party, are raising eyebrows about. And then, of course, there's also the more concrete fact that some of the new appointments coming into top positions, including some of the folks who lead the Southeast Asia portfolio in the Pentagon. I want to read a quote from one of them. Ayaw ng pangalan, baka magkahoy naman. No, I mean, essentially the argument of some of them is that so one of them who's going to lead this is Mr. Byers. He wrote last year, the U.S. might begin a cooperational spiral with China by proposing to remove U.S. military forces or weapon systems from the Philippines in exchange for the Chinese Coast Guard executing fewer patrols in the South China Sea or West Philippine Sea. I mean, these are the kind of arguments that these people are making just a year or months before getting appointed to very top positions. So let's just call them isolationist folks, right? I don't want to put any more labels on that. I just find it fascinating that there are people who are openly saying, yung Philippines, sorry na lang ha, kunin namin yung mga weapon system na, mag-usap. And like, this should be worried with the combination of Trump also saying all of those things, let's make a deal. So, how do we make sure that we hedge against worst case scenarios? Of course, we have to wish for the best, work for the best, but what are we doing to make sure that we're not over-dependent on the United States and don't end up as a pawn in what some of these folks are calling a cooperation spiral rather than a deterrence logic when dealing with China?
Well, Richard, the U.S. has been an isolationist country twice in history, before World War I and before World War II, and they could be isolationist again, and that's really the fear there, that they will say, okay, we'll agree with China to divide the world. President Xi has offered the U.S., let's divide the world. The first island chain will be, everything within the first island chain will belong to China, and beyond that, the U.S. And, Trump is a deal maker. We don't know how he will decide eventually, although we have a lot of friends in the State Department, in the U.S. Congress, Senate, and House, and the military. But the decision maker is something we really don't know. Because remember, Trump said just before he assumed office, said we cannot blame Russia for invading Ukraine. What if tomorrow Trump will say we cannot blame China for invading the Spratleys? So we really don't know. So how do we react to this? How do we respond? We have to strengthen our external defense. There's no other way. We have to strengthen we have to modernize the AFP. And that's why we're questioning why Congress chopped off 15 billion from the AFP modernization fund and put it in the flood control of DPWH. We have to strengthen because at the end of the day, we can only rely on ourselves. The U.S. might become isolationist. So we have to have deterrence, just like Vietnam. They have 6-kilo class submarines, they have fighter jets, they have anti-ship missiles. Of course, they cannot beat China in a war, but they can give China bloody nose, and that is enough for deterrence. That's what we want, deterrence only. Right now, we don't have that deterrence yet. So we have to spend more on AFP modernization to achieve that deterrence. Because we don't know really what Trump will do. Because
Sino
Trump is
pambato
threatening
sa
to
mayor?
withdraw from NATO. If he can withdraw from
Okay,
NATO, that's
itong si
a mutual defense treaty of the
Nanay
US with
Tanunyan, no?
Europe. He can also
Nanay
say,
Tanunyan.
we'll withdraw from our
Ayan.
mutual defense treaty with the Philippines. He can do
Mabigat
that
din na
also.
politiko yan sa General
If he can do
Santos,
that
no?
with Europe, with Boris, so they can do
Okay,
that with
talagang,
us. So we have to be prepared for that
kilalang-kilala
day.
po si
Thank
Right.
you.
To be fair, I don't think even
Madam,
Trump knows what Trump wants. So,
walang
like,
politician yan.
the theories is the
Okay,
last
nanay
whisper in his
kita
ear, but I don't want to go down
Okay,
that
sino pa?
road.
Sino pang,
AFP, Colonel Padilla, what is the Philippines doing to make sure na hindi tayo
katandem ni Nanay
hostage
Lita Nunez,
sa
no?
whims of whoever is occupying the
Okay,
White House,
itong
whether it's
si-
Trump, whoever is the next? Because as a sovereign
Tony
nation, we
Duma.
have to have a say, right? And what the
Yan.
heck we're gonna do about our own national interest. The reason I'm saying this is because as we speak,
Pang,
although
Vice
just for
Mayor.
transparency purposes, it was
Okay,
the
sa
former
baba
Biden
nila,
National
uniform
Security
na
Council
lahat.
people who tagged me with this one.
Sumasamahin
Oh, yung
na
mga
po
magre-replace
natin
sa amin,
sa
ganito. And the
mga
next thing I know, even my Republican
Konsero.
friends were saying, check out some of these guys
Okay,
getting in.
pinunahan
So,
po ng,
shout out to some of our
Jay
friends
Rivera.
there. But
Agad sumunod sa si Ban
the
Ban
reality is
Ponson.
that, you know, parati
saka,
natin pinag-usapan yan eh. There are
lahat-lahat na
alliances,
po
alliances
yung
are important, but at the end of the day, as a sovereign
Arsial,
nation, you call
Arsial,
your own
Arsial.
shot. You have to protect yourself. What are the things we have been doing and what are the things we should do,
Okay.
aside from the fact na hindi kaltasan
Tapos
yung
na.
budget from 50 to
Hindi po
30,
natin ito, no?
35
Hindi po
billion.
tayo
That's,
sa
oof,
buwangga.
that's 30%. Yeah.
Yes, no? Ano naman dyan is hindi tayo dependent on one particular nation for
Okay.
anything. What we do, even in
Ano
our
ng
rural
trabaho
nations,
ito?
no, we do it independently despite
Ikutin nyo natin, no?
offers
Ang
for
discussion nila.
for some nations to help us conduct it. No? So over and above that, while all of these things are happening, we are modernizing, we are strengthening our alliances, upskilling our personnel. No? So makita niyo dyan yung mga kasama sa ating mga balikatan exercises, how we upskill our personnel, no? Yung skill sets nila, integration and interoperability with yung mga capabilities ng like-minded nations. So we have also our RAA with Japan, no? Itong huling balikatan exercises, which used to be US and Philippines lang, last year we had active participation of the French Navy, and Australia was also there actively participating, no? And different countries who were there as observers are now signifying intentions to also have active participation in the different exercises that we hold. So we are not dependent on one particular nation for all of these things. So lumalawig itong ating cooperation with like-minded nations and well-meaning nations, because at the end of the day, all of us wants the same goal, no, to have and maintain a free and open Indo-Pacific. And a lot of other countries are now showing actively that they're into this one goal with us.
And in fact, maybe just in the same way in Europe, there's discussion about them shouldering their own burdens more, the Germans and the French. Maybe the effect could also be our allies in the region will also step up. It's not like Japan or India or small players or Australia. These are trillion-dollar economies. So I think before pushing the panic button, we have to realize that yes, China is big, but there are also other players who are not small. And some of them are even bigger than China potentially, like India down the road. Kay Yusek, from a National Security Council point of view, how are we, I don't want to use the word hedge because we're an ally with the United States, obviously, but how are we making sure that our options are not circumscribed by the whims of, wouldn't be nice if we have just peace with China, we'll solve all the problems together. Like, how do we make sure we're not confined to those kinds of...
Siguro, Richard, let me answer that question by first saying that we are at the early stages of the Trump administration. No, it's very early. No, we're still trying to, even the people in the State Department, even the people in the Pentagon.
And of course, sorry, if you can also say something on the 90-day freeze on the aid, yeah, please.
Even the American public, you know, they're also trying to find out, navigate through the new administration. So I think this is just part of the adjustment period, no? But you know what's very what I think what I must emphasize is in the early stages of the administration, or like 2 days after the oath taking, Secretary Manalo and Secretary Rubio had this very important phone call.
It was number 3 on the list of all countries.
That's right, and here in this call, Secretary Rubio underscored the U.S. ironclad commitment. No, I was not really expecting this early, because if you remember, this ironclad commitment really was utilized by the Biden administration. So it's now being used by Secretary Marco Rubio. So that really shows the continuity of American support and, as I quote, ironclad commitment to the Mutual Defense Treaty. And both parties also talked about advancing security cooperation, talked about expanding economic ties and deepen access for regional cooperation. And this was followed by another meeting between Defense Secretary Gibot Chodoro and the new National Security Advisor Mark Waltz, wherein they also talked about strengthening the alliance between the Philippines and the United States. So I think if we base our assessment here, no, it really shows the solid foundation of the U.S.-Philippine alliance. No? And it would be too early for us to speculate on what this might be. Now, talking about how the U.S. deals with NATO, really, President Trump's issue with NATO is about the contribution of member nations into the cost of NATO, because the United States is the one paying for the large chunk of NATO expenses. So what Trump wants is, since we're providing this security umbrella, you have to step up as well, because the cost to the United States is enormous, and he would like to devote these resources to the American citizens, to domestic.
So logically, are we in a position to tell Trump, you stand with us because we're doing our part?
Exactly. And I think we have shown to the United States that we have been ramping up also our defense spending. We now have a very clear archipelagic, comprehensive archipelagic defense concept, which really requires enormous sums of money into the investment into Philippine defense, to military spending or security spending. So if we follow the logic in NATO, wherein he's asking the NATO members to devote more of their resources, I think 3% of their GDP to defense, we're also doing the same, doing the same, spending a lot of money to be able to continue the Rehorizon 3, which is now focused on external defense and the territorial security of the country.
You say, in short, you're saying we're not in the same boat, we're not even in the same lake. Because when it comes to Trump's concern with Europe, it's a completely different situation from ours. Because here in Asia, we're doing our part.
Exactly.
And that the foundations are strong and bipartisan. Just to be clear, the 90-day freeze,
Yes.
what kind of aid does it affect? Does it affect foreign military financing from US? Does it affect other kind of defense aid agreements we have? Ano yung mga apektado dyan? And by the way, freeze lang yun, hindi sabihin mawala yan, di ba? Yeah.
Kasi there are two documents that came out of the White House. The first, from the United States government. The first one is the executive order issued by President Trump, and the second one was the memorandum issued by Secretary Rubio. And the one by President Trump it's still unclear. It's a bit ambiguous on what is the extent of the review being done. So even if we talk to our friends in the United States government, they're still trying to find out exactly. But my understanding is that it does not cover things like balikatan. It mostly covers development assistance to the Philippines, in particular the USAID projects in the Philippines. So anything funded by USAID, anything funded by the State Department will undergo a 90-day review. It doesn't mean that these projects will not continue. It's just that the President Trump wants to make sure that all of these projects are aligned to U.S. foreign policy. And if we base this on the discussions that we've had with U.S. leaders, members of the Trump administration, as I mentioned earlier, is that in my opinion, all of the projects that the U.S. are doing here are aligned with U.S. Foreign policy, especially the question of, does this assistance strengthen the United States, or does it make the United States more secure? And I think all of their projects here make the United States more secure.
I think probably it also has to do with the culture wars and issues there. Maybe Trump administration just making sure yung pera hindi na pupunta sa mga woke projects, as they call it, right? It's not really about, MAGA, we don't care about the world. So you're saying it's not an isolationist thing, it's just kind of a reassessment of some basic alignment in terms of America's spending abroad, because this is taxpayers' money for Americans, so it should be understandable. Again, I'm saying this because we have friends who are making mountain out of this. And sinasabi na, paano na yung mga budget ng mga bayaran ng Amerika? May mga nagpapatawa. Sabi, kamusta naman China? Medyo nag-shrink yung economy. Baka naman. Last point, and then I want to open it up. Commodore Terry, of course, your PhD was from Japan. Philippine Coast Guard has absolutely great relationship with Japan. Japan played a very important role in modernization of our Coast Guard. What do you have to say about the other important players in light of the fact that we had an RRA ratified with Japan, the French are coming in, and I think people forget, actually, a lot of our modern weapon systems are not American, like they're Koreans, they're Indian, Israeli, you get what I'm saying? So I think people forget that actually we are very diversified already in terms of our defense acquisitions, and also in Coast Guard, how much, helpful other countries are against, aside from the US.
Thank you, Richard. But before that, I would like to share my optimism muna, for this Trump administration. I think people has already forgotten that the first time that they clarified the Mutual Defense Treaty that is also covering South China Sea was during the time of President Trump and having Secretary Pompeo as a Secretary of State in 2019. That was the first time that the U.S. government clarified that the Mutual Defense Treaty can be applied in the South China Sea. So, Trump has been like that since Trump 1.0 during his first administration. So ngayon, he can say whatever he wants, but with the cabinet members that are in place right now, and I'm also a believer that United States is a mature democratic country. There are democratic institutions in place that will not allow the U.S. government to, deteriorate from being protector
Okay,
of the
ang
rules-based
crime rate
order
daw
that
sa
we all
Metro
enjoy.
Manila
And, without
ay
going into
bumaba
details kasi alis si Justice
by
Carpio, I would also like to highlight that the transparency effort of the Philippine
January,
government is also
2025.
anchored in protecting our interests
Okay,
na
ayon po
hindi tayo
kay
dependent sa isang bansa lamang.
sinong
The transparency initiative that we're doing is to
and
create
CRPO,
awareness to the international partners who are protector of the rules-based
carried
order. We have to make
451
sure that
crimes
across
against
Europe, Japan,
person
Australia, and the entire world, to
and
include India,
properties
that there is
in
this
January,
one
no?
country that is
Lower by 110,
intentionally and blatantly
than
violating the
the
international
same
law. I've
month
always
last
been
year.
mentioning this.
Okay,
The transparency efforts allow the international community to understand that our fight in the West
Yan
Philippine
po,
Sea is not just for us
latest po ng
Filipinos.
crime
It's not
index
just for our own sovereignty.
sa national
It is a
mga
fight for
city, no?
everybody that
Continue
wants
lang
to preserve the rules-based order. Otherwise, we're going to go back to the system before the First and Second World War that might justifies whatever actions that they can do. And that is what we're doing right now. The mere fact that we launched transparency efforts 2 years ago, marami ng bansa ang nakipag-ugnayan sa Armed Forces of the Philippines, Philippine Coast Guard, to deepen our security cooperation and to support our modernization efforts for the military. We can now hear from Germany, France, United Kingdom, and Canada as well. Even the Indian government is also supportive of our efforts. And that's another positive impact of the Transparency Initiative.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you for that clarification and a more positive note under the Trump 2.0 administration. Now, because Justice has to go a little bit ahead, the rest will still stick around a little bit. Siguro yung mga ibang kaibigan natin sa media, if they have questions that has to do with the legal aspects of the West Philippines disputes, or even the strategic aspects, are there any questions or any reactions or?
Yeah, I think we have to be more strict in registering late birth registrations with the register of civil registrar. If there is a late registration, it should not be the sole authority of the civil register to approve it. It should go to, let's say, DOJ or some other body, just to make sure that there is a counter-checking mechanism, because you've seen a lot of late registrations that turn out to be fake, and as that's the entry of a lot of Chinese aliens getting Filipino citizenship. So I think that has to be strengthened. It cannot be the civil registrar himself who will decide that these late registrants should be approved. It has to be another body just to counter-check.
For that, no, ang ano natin dyan is, when there is smoke, there is flame. So we do not downplay any report that is given to the Armed Forces of the Philippines. Ang AFP is just one of the players in this, no. So if we look at this, we have to approach it in a whole of government approach, no. So if we look at all of this malign influence, all of this parts and bits and pieces that form part of a grand plan, tulong-tulong ang lahat-lahat ng iba't ibang ahensya rito. So tinitingnan natin dito, katulad nitong huling national nga na iniimbestigahan natin, he got his citizenship because he married a Filipina. So nasa batas kasi din natin yun, no? So yun yung nagamit for legality of that. So what we look into on the side of the AFP are national security implications. So yun sa side namin. That's why we are fortifying our units to have this intelligence command and cyber command. Kasi nga, ito na yung modern warfare that we're facing. So we also have to marry, no, yung efforts ng ating AFP into the contemporary modern challenges that we face. So ito, hindi kaya ng AFP, ito lang, but together with all other agencies. Kasi nga, Bureau of Immigration, kasama dito, no, di ba? Pati nga po yung mga birth certificates and all, they're all part of this. So, hindi siya isang part lang po ang AFP to this, no? So we have to have great alliances also with the different agencies on this. And for this, nakita natin na naging mapanuri na nga tayo ngayon as we keep saying that security is everyone's responsibility, hindi lang din government ito, but bawat mamamayang Pilipino. So hindi namin isang tabi na malaking tulong po yung reports na binibigay ng ating mga kababayan for us to really closely look into this. And kung meron mang report na matanggap ang AFP, aaksyonan namin ito.
There's a disproportionate focus based on our intelligence that certain demographics are being targeted, should we work with community leaders there? Because as we speak, there are community leaders who are saying, oh, don't target us and all. So maybe the logical solution is, let's just work together so that it doesn't come off as if we're targeting the whole community. We're just trying to look at the rotten apples here and there.
Yes or no? So this is all part of this, no? So yung transparency initiative sa amin sa AFP po, we came up with our communications plan, no? Meron tayong plan mulat. So kasama yan, we really go down to the levels of even our fishermen, kinakausap natin yan. Kaya nga itong mga part ng drones ngayon nire-report na nila, no? So through all of this, yung huling lumabas was a previous incident pa. Dahil nakita nga niya na ito na malaking usapin na to. Na yung dati, hindi naman nila nire-report because these are small incidents lang. Ngayon, they also see a bigger picture to this. So mas malawak na rin yung understanding ng bawat Pilipino, no? And yung concern nila to be part of this. So ang gusto talaga din natin dyan is to ignite the patriotism of the Filipino and the nationalism of every Filipino to be part of this conversation as a whole.
Sorry, Philippine Coast Guard.
And another question?
So, ibig sabihin, yung mga under sa GSP Club, hindi masyado maapektuhan. Dahil protected sila.
Sasaki from the Kyoto News, Japanese, and I wish to ask...
Sa unang tanong tungkol dun sa insidente sa Palawan, yes, we have been coordinating very closely with our intelligence services, with the Philippine National Police, the National Bureau of Investigation, and all law enforcement agencies of government. Gaya nga nung sinabi ko kanina, because there will be announcements here in the next few days. No? Siguro what I can say right now is that there will be more arrests. And this includes what happened there in Palawan. No? Because we have ramped up our counterintelligence efforts. And because of that, we're slowly unraveling the conspiracy, no? This operation that being done by foreign actors to conduct espionage in the Philippines. No? Ayoko lang pangunahan ang National Bureau of Investigation in the Department of Justice. But yes, we are aware. No? In fact, we are part of the team that's looking into this, and that we expect more arrests in the coming days. Because you know, when you have this type of individual arrested, this leads to another individual no? Because these are all cells, so to speak. Okay. So the other question, the Typhoon missile system, I think the Philippine government has made very clear its position that the presence of the Typhoon missile system in the Philippines was part, of course, of the Balikatan exercises. So the purpose of that was to train Filipino troops in utilizing this. It is not for offensive purposes. No? It is primarily for defensive purposes.
Okay,
and to
ito
ensure
maganda ka
that
rito yung
the Philippines has capacity
ba, no?
to operate such weapon system. And the Philippines has expressed its interest to buy these types of systems. In the same manner that we bought the BrahMos missile system, in the same manner that, you know, we're getting other types of weapon systems, the Typhoon is just one of those tools that we can use to strengthen our comprehensive archipelagic defense concept. And very clearly, it is for defensive purposes. No? So, as mentioned by the armed forces, this is a sovereign act. This is a decision of the Philippine government, and it is not meant for any other state. It is for the territorial integrity of the Philippines.
And quite rich for China to talk about nuclear war as well. They're nuclear submarines, and they're doing intercontinental ballistic missile tests last September. Now, from the AFP perspective, and then I want to go also to Justice Scorpion, this big question.
For that, no, na-mention naman ni Sir, it's all part of the comprehensive archipelagic defense concept. What we do in terms of fortifying our defenses is a sovereign act of the Philippines. And kasama lahat yan, no, is all interconnected to one another. Our CAD-C is connected to our modernization projects. It's connected to the laws that are being passed, yung lumabas na about our archipelagic sea lanes, our SRDP. So lahat po ito is all connected to one another. So whatever we do in terms of fortifying our defenses is for us to determine and to put into play without any external entity dictating how we would do it.
Justice Scorpion, how do you see the whole Typhoon drama? Do you think the Philippines should push for acquisition of those weapon systems? Do you think we're making the Chinese rightfully nervous about this? What should be the big grand strategy on this front, if I may say it?
Well, we're just following what China did to the U.S. The Chinese, to prevent the Americans from sailing the South China Sea, they developed their DF-21-22 missiles, and that target the aircraft carriers 1,000 kilometers away. And that is the asymmetrical defense. Very expensive to have aircraft carriers, to develop aircraft carriers. So with this far cheaper missiles, you can deter the aircraft carriers from entering the South China Sea. We also cannot manufacture warships, where they're very expensive. It's cheaper to have BrahMos missiles or Typhoon missiles to serve as deterrent. This is a matter of deterrence, really. We cannot hope to invade China with this. We cannot hope to defeat China with this. We can only hope to deter China with this. And that's really the reason for this. Simply deterrence, not to intimidate China, because China's nuclear bombs. You cannot intimidate somebody because nuclear weapons and you don't have, you will be wiped out. So this is purely deterrence, and that is how China should see it. We're just defending.
But Justice, there was a question: should we eventually push the Americans to extend their nuclear umbrella to us, or maybe it's too early to go that far? Because that's a big debate in Japan, from what I understand my conversations there.
Well, that goes already with the Mutual Defense Treaty, because if there is a nuclear attack on us, then the Americans will be obliged legally to support us, and the only way to, under international law, you have to retaliate with the same force that was used against you. So if it's a nuclear attack, you can respond by a nuclear attack. That's automatic under the Mutual Defense Treaty. It's because mutual defense means you can respond proportionately to the gravity of the attack.
Are there other questions? We more proactively call out certain questionable behavior, perceptions, narratives, because I think we have to be honest that I mean, the Philippines is, for me, in a kind of a double Cold War, right? One is we're caught in between US and China, but the other one is that there are two major coming elections. I know our government people cannot say much about that, but I'll start with you, Justice Carpio. How should we navigate this kind of a two-level Cold War of US-China competition and Duterte administration, or Duterte versus Marcos kind of competition as we head into these elections? Because my sense is could be the first election whereby TikTok will play a very important role. We saw that in the US with the swing voters going for MAGA. We saw that in Indonesia with proposed elections last year. But also, I think this is the election where we'll see a lot of discussion on West Philippines issue. We're already seeing surveys, no? Na boboto ba kayo sa mga pro-China candidates? We never had surveys like that before, right? Now we can have even... So that means that the tenure, the cadence, the trajectory of conversations is getting more serious, because we're in a very serious situation. I think people are not realizing what's happening to us is not just normal espionage activities. This is like Berlin of the 21st century. I don't want to scare people, but I think we have to realize we are at the very front line of big tectonic movements in terms of geopolitics. Justice Carpio, maybe some final notes on that, and then also what are the things we should do moving forward, especially with elections coming in and things getting very hot in the Philippines.
Well, there is only one country in the world that is invading us using use of force or threat of force, and that's China. It's invading our maritime zones. It's invading our island territories in the West Philippine Sea. And then it's only
sa lahat, walang kinikilingan, walang kinakampihan, at walang pinapanigan ang programa ito. Ang programa ito ay public service sa kahanginan at trabaho lamang.
At the moment, we are forced to ally ourselves with former colonial master, because our colonial master has no more territorial or maritime designs on our territory. It's China that has territorial and maritime designs on our territory. So I think the choice is obvious. We have to defend our maritime zones and our island territories. That's the first obligation of a state, to defend its territory, because without territory you don't have a state. And that's the way I look at it. We really have no choice. But at this point,
plugging
the US as
dito po
ally,
sa local
because it's the only
government ng Zamboanga
nuclear-armed country that's willing to defend us against a nuclear-armed China. Thank you.
So avoid false equivalence. Just quick point, Justice Scorpio. Obviously, you know, you and I have not been shy of being critical of government throughout different administration. Even when you were inside government, you were critical. I think in media, in academia, we're always trained to be, basta kung anong position ng government, dapat we have to check it to balance it. I'm not saying that we shouldn't criticize the government, but do you think it is also important for people to realize that we need to have, I hate to use this word, unity more than ever, right?
22.
Considering the urgency of the situation we're facing. That's why I use the term whole of nation. Whole of nation doesn't mean that we'll just be okay with whatever happens with the government. But whole of nation is also this basic understanding na may mga bagay kung saan talaga dapat magsama-sama tayo. And may mga bagay na talaga you have to have private-public partnership and civil society has to work in tandem. I mean, this conversation is very much multi-sectoral, right? Not only interagency. What do you have to say about that, Justice? Because you're the most experienced person here. You have straddled government, civil society, and academia throughout the years.
Well, as I said, I think the government now, the incumbent administration, is on the right path, right policy as far as the West Philippine Sea is concerned. I mean, we just have to tweak some of the strategies and the tactics, but it's on the right path.
Dito sa District 1 naman,
we have to defend our island territories, and we have to strengthen our alliances with the U.S. and like-minded states. And we must invite our allies to sail in the West Philippine Sea, because by sailing the West Philippine Sea, they're actually enforcing the arbitral award. And we are on the right track, but we have to tweak some of these things, because like for example, arbitration, there's a reluctance to file an arbitration case now. We have to convince the government to do that. Thank you.
So proactive. Commodore Tariela, final word?
Okay, Pinpin Pareha, no? Ayan. Sino kasama ni Pinpin Pareha?
Minsan nagugulat ako kay Richard pag biglang ako na yung tatanungin, sir. Well, I think West Philippine Sea is the most unifying issue that we have right now. And the 2025 midterm election, para sa akin, this will be a litmus test on how unified the Filipinos are when we talk about the West Philippine Sea issue. Noong mga nakaraang eleksyon, we never ask accountability among the candidates how they stand or how they view the issue in the West Philippine Sea. But because of the transparency effort of the National Task Force West Philippine Sea, under the leadership of General Eduardo Año, we were able to awaken the sense of patriotism ng ating mga kababayang Pilipino. They were also asking how ordinary Filipinos can support our fight in the West Philippine Sea. I think this coming election, this is the best way that you can support our fight in the West Philippine Sea. We have to make sure that those members of the legislative branch that we're going to elect, whether in the Senate or in the Congress, are those people who will be supporting President Bongbong Marcos in standing firm with his commitment of not surrendering a square inch of our territory to any foreign power. Huwag na tayong magboto ng mga kandidato na pro-China at hindi susuporta sa modernisasyon ng Armed Forces of the Philippines at ng Philippine Coast Guard. It will be very difficult for the AFP and for the Coast Guard, for BFAR and other government agencies to support our annual budget. Kung ang ilalagay natin sa Kongreso ay ang mga miyembro ng Kongreso at Senado na never really cared about our fight in the West Philippine Sea. So, the most important and patriotic contribution that you can do for our fight in the West Philippine Sea are elect members of the legislative branch who will be supporting our government in not surrendering a square inch of our territory. Thank you.
Arking premise is our right is our might. So ang sabi nga ni Jay, ang uniting factor ng Filipinos ngayon is the usapin ng West Philippine Sea. And with that, as we shift from the AFP, from the internal security operations to territorial defense, ito na yung nagiging focus natin. When we say territorial defense, it's not an outside entity coming in, but we're looking at the Trojan horse inside and trying to look at kung ano yung mga different factors that contribute to a greater
Ayan po, mga suki mga kawawayan.
And as the election season comes in, ito may malaking usapin dyan is our BARM elections, which is a historical feat for the Philippines. And we're looking at any influence that will hamper the peaceful conduct of this. So, kasama lahat yan sa lahat ng tinututukan natin. And with this, bawat mamamayang Pilipino, parte tayo dyan as we exercise our constitutional right to have our voice be heard and have a stake on who will be leading us into our future. Ito lahat, we do not lose focus on the bigger challenge and the bigger picture out there. Kung ano man itong mga nangyayari internally, let's look at how it is connected to the influences that they have with the bigger challenges we have. And as one Filipino nation, no, kung ano man yan, pinupush natin na for the rest of this, natin, no, mga kababayan natin na nalihis ng landas to come back to the folds of the law, and together we fight a bigger challenge, which is territorial defense. And so, ang laging binabanggit ng AFP po dyan is, ito po ang ating karagatan, ito ang ating karapatan, at ito ang ating kinabukasan. This is our seas, our rights, and our future. So, alamin natin ito, atin itong ipaglaban, at atin itong suportahan.
Basta kasama po si Marisha.
Ako, actually, Tariela for Senator.
Okay, last na punta na po sa...
Matagal ko na itong sinasabi eh. And medyo disappointed ako nung dumaan yung filing ng candidacy. Hindi nag-file ang aking senador. So, pagpasensya na natin hanggang postcard na lang siya. For now. Well, just very short lang naman po. I just want to thank the Filipino people for the overwhelming support. 84% of the public in the latest survey show that 84% of the Filipino people support the Philippine government's position in asserting our rights in the West Philippine Sea. And as you mentioned, bakit hindi 100%? It's because we're not a authoritarian state. We're not we're a democracy. And 84% sa ibang bansa, napakalaki na niyan. Sila, meron lang silang 55%. 56, tuwan-tuwa na sila. That's already a vast majority. But us to have 84%, in one of the largest countries in the world, with a large population, to have that kind of critical mass supporting government is a really big thing, and that is because of people like you, Richard, and my colleagues here in government who continue to fight the good fight for God and country. Maraming salamat.
Thank you very much.
Ang Omar Hataman, mga suki, no? So tapos na ang plugging natin, isama rin si Omar Hataman na huwag po ay kalimutan po si Omar Hataman, no? So sige, tapos na po ang trabaho natin, palagay ko tama na po. Tapos na rin ang yung discussion
or yung events na nag-transpire, we are giving you the benefit of the doubt. Tinatanong ko lang po, a non-legal question, kung handa si Mr. Oñate bayaran ang 6% sa 55 million pesos dun sa ad na iyan.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. If, before he can answer, may we ask also, with all due respect to the BIR official, if the contribution was returned, is there still a taxable transaction? If there is, then Mr. Oñate will pay for it. But if there's none, baka wala na rin po. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Actually, question lang kasi di ba on record, it's your law office who's the client of the network.
Male voice.
Tama po ba? Kasi kayo yung nag-place ng ad eh.
Yes, ma'am, we place the ad.
So technically, the burden to pay BIR is also with your law office. Tama ba BIR?
It depends po kung anong tax ang babayaran.
Since donation po siya, donor, dapat donor po yung nagbayad po.
Actually, magulo nga yung transaction eh. Kasi parang nakakuha ng pera si Mr. Oñate, binigay niya sa law office.
Binigay daw in cash. If I'm correct, kaya ako nalilito sa narration of events, Senator Binay, nung una tayo nagtakpo, ang sabi sa hearing, dinala yung 55 million ni Mr. Oñate kay Greg Garcia. Diretso. Wala pang abogado doon. Kaya lang hindi mabuo ng pirma at ni Mr. Oñate yung documentary requirements. Kaya ang Ghana Law Office ang siyang ng pirma at nagbigay ng documentary requirements. Tama po ba yun? That's according to the transcript.
Madam Chair,
I would assume yung OR ng network nakapangalan po sa law office.
yes, Madam Chair. What happened was, we engaged the services of Mr. Greg Garcia. He is an advertising guru. If you want to sell a product, we have a campaign. We engaged him. And then, so kami ho yung client ni Mr. Garcia.
Okay, nakapahinga na po ang
inyong natin yung dokumento. You submitted to the committee, a billing statement. Kayo yung client eh.
Yes po.
Wala naman ho nakasulat na Greg Garcia dito. And
yes po.
Assume you signed the contract with the networks. Tama po ba?
Yes po.
And then, isa nyo nga yung OR. So,
yes, ma'am. Ang sinasabi lang ho namin, when we received the billing, we forwarded it to Mr. Oñate, and it was Mr. Oñate who paid it in cash, as he testified during the last hearing. He paid it in cash to Mr. Greg Garcia. And I'm sure Mr. Greg Garcia will also confirm that, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Yes, babalikan ko lang yung BIR. Dahil
Okay,
kasi,
kung saan
yung
ang
date
source
ng
ng
billing
news, no?
statement, December 29.
Okay, siyempre,
So yung 30 days,
sa
dapat
kanyang
katapusan ng
sariling tahanan.
January, hindi po ba?
Okay, at
Kung
saka
gano'n,
itong
yung
banner program
pag-atras
po
ng
ng
mga
Hello
donor, noong
Station,
February 8, huli na.
opinion balita at iba pa,
Due
ng
yung donor stocks as early as
papasok na po
February,
ng
hindi,
14
as
na taon,
early
no?
as January.
Okay, so,
Diba?
Depende po actually sa
ayan.
intention eh. Kasi
Dahil
po,
po sa inyo,
pwede rin pong possible na
dahil po
nangyari
sa tulong nyo,
nag-donate,
ganito po kahaba
and then
ng
pag
programa, no?
return po ang term,
Okay,
kasi
yung
pag
mga
return, way
suki
after,
natin,
para lumalabas
lalo
nag-donate
magpa-plugging.
back, so pwede rin pong
okay, salamat po mga
Kahit lampas
pag
na yung
in-accept na po kasi
kahit
na-
lampas na yung 30-day
sa
period.
pamamagitan na
Opo, in-accept
tulong
po yung
nyo.
donation initially.
Okay.
May
Inaccept,
acceptance
binayad
po.
na sa iba eh.
mahaba po ang
binayad
inabot
na
ng
nga sa
programa ito,
PBA.
no?
Yes po, so may donation
Okay.
na po yun.
Nag-airing na nga
Salon?
sila eh.
Yes, opo.
Congress-
So,
Ang
Congress-
BIR lang ang
Salon.
hindi sinabihan.
Okay,
Opo, nag-donation na po. Meron na pong
tagal po na nagkakilala.
perfected na yung contract. Okay na.
Okay, hindi mo
At may
kalimutan.
bayaran na po yung donor's tax doon within 30 days. Ngayon, yung intention na ibalik, para lumalabas,
Okay,
dedicated it
paalam
back.
tayo. Alam, marami
That's right.
naman ang
So,
link
So
parang-
yan.
ano nangyari?
May donor's tax po ulit.
Dalawang donation.
Eh, bahala
Ikalawang
na kayo
donor's tax
mag-click
na
nun.
to.
Sa-
Opo,
mag-share,
kasi in-accept
mag-follow.
po nila eh. Tapos,
Okay,
6%
mag-subscribe.
tapos may
Bahala na
ikalawang
kayo.
6% may penalties pa kasi
Kasi
late payment.
importante,
yes po.
ang peseta
Tanggap po ba
po ay
ninyo yun?
meron. Okay.
We
Meron
disagree
yung
po,
mga
but we
pinadala sa
respect
mga
the
Gcash.
opinion of the
Okay,
good
pinadala sa mga
official from the
Maya.
BIR. If there are, like what we said,
Yeah.
if there are taxable
Iba na
consequences, I'm sure
Iba
Mr.
na yung
Oñate
pinagkapasya
is
sa
very
ano?
much willing to settle and pay for it.
25.
Thank you.
Madam
Okay
Chair.
lang sa akin
Yes,
kasi
Gusto ko lang po tanungin yung
makaproduce na po yung
taga-COMELEC.
presenta
Kasi
yung
di ba
kape, no?
tayo as a candidate, we
Makaproduce
file SOSE. Pagdating
Hindi
po ba
maubusan
dun sa
ng kape,
People's
no?
Initiative, merong ganitong
Okay, so
requirement
there you are. Wala tayong masamang
na
tinapay.
kailangan isubmit ng mga proponents sa
100%
People's
Wala po,
Initiative.
Wala po.
Sigurado
Madam
ako.
Chair, and that's the reason why
At
we
saka
are
sigurado
reviewing
kayo na wala akong
the
masamang
IRR.
tinapay
If that
dyan,
is the
no?
case,
Sa totoo lang.
maaaring maisama rin po
Okay,
na provision po yan.
trabaho lang ng
I highly
maayos,
recommend
wala akong pinipperwisyo
Chairman
sa inyo.
Garcia na siguro dapat
Okay.
in the
Malinis ang
interest of
trabaho natin,
transparency, di ba? Na meron din
Hindi natin
ganitong
bahiran po ng,
requirement pagdating sa
Okay,
People's
hindi
Initiative.
Yes,
mabuti
Madam
sa
Chair. In
kapwa ang
fact,
trabaho natin,
but
no?
the first issue that we will have to resolve is whether
Kaya,
the IRR is
bye-bye
valid
na.
or not.
Good night
Because
na.
if there is really no
Okay,
enabling law,
gabi ng
then there
Lunes.
is no IRR, so to
Bukas,
speak.
bukas,
So that we will have to come to other
Okay.
issues
Naku,
after
This
the
has
first issue.
been
Nako, Chair,
lamang po.
Chair Garcia, narinig naman natin lahat ng legal luminaries po ulit-ulit
Okay.
sinasabi, inadequate yung batas,
So,
mas
patugtog
lalo
natin
pa
ito,
yung COMELEC resolution.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Chairman Garcia lang po.
Madam Chair, that will be one of the issues to be resolved by our panel created for the purpose of reviewing the supposedly IRR for Republic Act 6735.
Yes, I think Santiago very clear. ALS is
And related actually larger issues. Chair Garcia, we've talked about the case of Santiago versus Comelec at length, in which the court ruled that RA 6735 was inadequate as an enabling law for People's Initiative. That same year, 1997 also, the court issued a resolution